Good morning. We're not used to saying that. We have moved our Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee work session to the morning to accommodate colleagues on the Economic Development Committee and some other council dynamics that are happening today. And since we are so gracious with our Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee, and I appreciate colleagues for their indulgence, we have moved to the morning. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. What is normally a Monday afternoon committee is now Monday morning one. We're back here for the additional work session that we have on the University Boulevard Corridor Plan. I believe this is the fourth committee work session that we have had up to this point, and we're going to go through the remainder and the balance of the items from last week, and then the follow-up items, starting with the follow-up items from the initial sessions, and then the addendum, which includes the follow-up items from last week's session. I appreciate planning staff and council staff working together to follow up on several of those items. I'll just note that there are two different packets for those who are trying to follow. We're starting with the originally posted packet, and then we will move on to the addendum. So we will reference it there. We're joined, as we have been at each of the other sessions, by the additional district council member, since one serves on this committee, Councilmember Mink. So thank you for joining us, as well as colleagues on the committee. And with that, let's go through the packet. Ms. Dunn.
Yep, thank you, and good morning. You are correct. We did not finish all the material that we had posted for last week's work session, so we're going to start there, and it is the beginning of the staff report for today. We just recopied the information. There may be a little slight tweak to something here or there if you're comparing it to the one last time. Having listening to the conversation last week, sometimes that changes things slightly, but for the most part, it is the same as what you had posted last week, and we're starting with housing. And so the University Corridor Plan area is home to around 3,400 housing units, which are characterized by their general affordability compared to the county as a whole. There are over 1,300 multifamily residential units in the plan area, and over 350 of those units are income restricted units, so they provide regulated affordable housing. And many of those units, or many units in general in the plan area, are for seniors and special needs housing. Also, a lot of the multifamily housing units that aren't necessarily income restricted in the plan area were built in the 1980s, so they have been around for a while, and again, that contributes to their affordability. The plan aims to balance the preservation of existing market rate affordable housing, such as those built in the 1980s, as we've just mentioned, with the production of new housing that can create additional moderately priced dwelling units. The plan also seeks to expand housing opportunities along the corridor by introducing new residential building types that support the existing and planned BRT infrastructure. The housing recommendations are broken into different categories, so we'll start with the first one, which is affordable housing. And the housing recommendations are on the second page of the staff report, which are to provide 15% MPDUs in new development, prioritize greater percentages of more affordable MPDUs than required by county code as a public benefit priority under the optional method of development. The third one is when public properties are redeveloped with a residential component, strive to provide a minimum of 30% MPDUs, with 15% affordable to households earning the standard MPDU level and 15% affordable to households at or below 50% of AMI, area median income. And then fourth, support the development of permanent and temporary supportive housing for people experiencing homelessness in the plan area. Council staff comment on this is that generally, we have seen in the last few master plans that we have been addressing publicly owned properties and housing affordability. There is the phrase to strive to do this in that third recommendation, and staff just recommends taking that out, as we don't strive to do it. We are actually asking that our public properties provide this level of affordability, and that's how it appears in other master plans.
Great. Without objection, I don't see any comments. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. The next category we have is preservation of affordable housing, and the recommendations are to preserve existing market rate affordable housing where practicable, striving for no net loss of market rate affordable housing in the event of redevelopment, explore and leverage partnerships with public, private, nonprofit, philanthropic, and religious institutions. Property owners should work with Montgomery County Department of Housing and Community Affairs to extend any federal and county subsidy contracts to retain and expand the current levels of affordability in the plan area. Turning to the third page of the staff report, council staff suggests the committee support these preservation of affordable housing recommendations. They're very similar to what we have in other master plans.
It's consistent with other master plans. Don't see any comments, so without objection.
Great, thank you. The next one is housing production and housing diversity, which is to add more units to the housing inventory, including more types of housing units. This will increase the amount of housing and help meet the diversity of incomes and household types, such as families, seniors, and persons with disabilities in the plan area. Second recommendation, utilize CRT and CRN zones as primary zones to introduce new residential typologies along the corridor, as well as within proximity to proposed BRT stations. Prioritize family-size market rate and affordable units for rent and for sale in the residential development projects as a public benefit under the optional method of development. The fourth recommendation is that new housing development in the plan area should strive to increase the quality and quantity of housing units that are accessible to people with disabilities and older adults. And then finally, provide financial and other incentives to boost housing production for market rate and affordable housing. Council staff suggests the committee support these recommendations with one minor edit. The second recommendation says to utilize the CRT and CRN zones as the primary zones for new residential typologies, and a little bit of this might go to whatever happens with the zoning that occurs and your recommendations related to it in the overlay. So the council suggested just maybe as the primary zones be deleted. It's unnecessary, and it also allows for flexibility with whatever happens with the zoning in the area.
Why don't we take that piece up first, then open it up to the broader questions, because I don't think there's a lot of controversy about that suggestion, which I think makes sense, and I don't see any objection among colleagues. But
Could you just restate it? I'm sorry.
it just
Yeah.
as the primary zones.
It's the second recommendation to utilize
as the
CRT and
primary
CRN zones as the primary zones to introduce new residential typologies along the corridor. It gets at the idea that, one, the two recommendations, one, that a lot of the institutional properties are being recommended for CRT, and we expect to then see different housing typologies there. The other is in those residential blocks that border University Boulevard, the idea that CRN zoning would allow for more housing typologies there. Council staff is just suggesting to remove the words as the primary.
We don't need it, and it
Zones.
predisposes to other decisions that we're making. So,
That's all.
without objection, let's
Okay.
remove as the primary zones. We can take up the broader question, because I think that's not
Correct.
controversial. So without objection, we'll accept council staff recommendation of removing as the primary zones. Before we dispose of this particular issue, we'll open it up to colleagues. Councilmember Jawanda.
Thank you. And this kind of goes into the last point too. We were moving so efficiently that I didn't catch myself for my notes. And we've had this discussion before on the with my friends at planning around what happens when naturally occurring affordable housing is redeveloped, and how definitive we are in the language that, as opposed to striving for preservation, that per the last point we just made, that we actually want to make sure that it is preserved. And we've had this discussion over the years. So I'm sure you're feeling deja vu too. I feel like we need to make more progress on it, because I'm really concerned about displacement. I had a conversation, I've spoken with many of you about this over the years, but in the context of this plan, in previous policies that we passed, like the ZTA 2512, where one of the main concerns of the racial equity report is displacement of current low-income communities of color from homes that are moderately priced and affordable, either renters or if there's, I'm primarily concerned about renters because they don't have the decision to sell or not. And is there any language, is there any way that we can be more, as opposed to striving for no net loss of market rate affordable housing in the case of redevelopment, actually saying that's what what must be achieved? Because the fact of the matter is, if there's a low-income renter on University Boulevard and they're upzoned and they can redevelop into whatever, they're not coming back unless we say they have to come back. It's just they're not going to be able to afford what comes in its place. It's just a fact. And so I'm really concerned about that, particularly in this corridor, but also in other corridors. So is there any language or anything that we've learned or would be any concern with not having striving, but that we're saying we want no net loss?
Well, I'll just note, we did accept the recommendation that council staff put forward to adopt similar language to other master plans where we struck strive to. So that does make it stronger.
Not in this context. That was the first thing we did. We did that in the NPDUs, which was also my amendment for public land.
Right.
The bill that I introduced. But I'm talking about in the next one for the preservation of natural curves.
Just council staff owner, son.
Yeah, and what I would say is, certainly when it's public land, it is perfectly within the purview for the public entities to say, we are going to provide X. And so you have not striving to do it, but you're going to do it. When you have privately held land and you put in a recommendation or you put in a requirement that there is no net loss, there are two ways that can occur. If the property redevelops and you're saying no net loss and you're counting all the current units as affordable and you want them to retain that, do they retain that as regulated affordable? Well, then you're basically saying that the next project could practically be all MPDUs or extremely high percentage. Right now, what we've recommended and what we've discussed in this plan is a 15% requirement. All our recent master plans have gone from 12.5% to a 15% requirement. If there's no net loss and we haven't given the property enough density to recoup, they could be required to make a 50% or even a 75% MPDU requirement if there's no loss of affordable units. I know it gets a little confusing, but you'd have to then balance how much do you want to rezone a property. And we've done that in other master plans where we've really tried to lay out to get to a strict no net loss. When we did this in Tacoma Park, you would have to be looking at FARs of 6 and 8 so that all the existing units could come back as an MPDU or income restricted regulated affordable unit. You'd have to have enough market rate to offset that so that a private developer could actually afford to do it. And even at that, we don't know that they would go to that high a density, but that's the trade-off.
Right. I understand in the MPDU context, but here we're talking about, it's a little different because we're talking about striving for no net loss of market rate affordable, which is not exactly the same as the MPDU.
I'm not sure how you would enforce that they provide that unit.
Whatever they're redeveloping, what the costs of the current properties are. That's why I'm asking, is there a way to, you get my point, I hope, that if a renter in a moderately priced unit or an owner in a moderately priced unit, if the things that come, they're going to be more expensive, and I worry about that displacement issue.
Sure. So for the record, Lisa Gavoni, Planning Supervisor with Montgomery Planning. So first I want to answer your question about what we've been doing on this. So as the PHP Committee knows, a lot of our recent master plans have included this language for no net loss, striving for no net loss. We have one project in the Bethesda area which didn't really have that language, but they have an agreement for rental agreements in place of market rate affordable housing. However, it is a negotiation with the Department of Housing and Community Affairs. They also, like Ms. Dunn said, it's in the Bethesda area. They have a lot of density. They are able to balance that financial feasibility with preserving these units through rental agreements. And rental agreements are, for those that don't know, there are additional income restricted units, but about at 80% area median.
Which is different than MPDU.
Which is different than MPDUs. However, that, as Ms. Dunn said, that is carefully balanced with the density, the FAR, the units, the MPDUs, all of those things. That is the negotiation with the Department of Housing and Community Affairs, and I don't think the language in this plan precludes that from happening. I think that can still happen if future projects come in. I would also say that there is a tremendous amount of income restricted, mission driven units here. I would say only the condominium, University Towers, and the Warwick are really that have that market rate affordable housing classification. So a lot of the projects here, if they should redevelop, are already being done by mission driven. But I would say, just to build on what Ms. Dunn said, I think the language that we have in our plan for market rate affordable housing for striving to is strong. I don't think it's precluded from the Department of Housing and Community Affairs for negotiating for that. I think it does give them leverage, but it also gives us leverage to look at all the other factors at play, the density, the rents, the height, the location, and I think that's really important when we're talking about the long-term life of a master plan.
Are there examples of, and you're right, and I appreciate you bringing up that we've done this language before, and as I said, I brought up this issue, particularly the word strive before in the same context. Are there examples of, other than the Bethesda one, where redevelopment has occurred in a previous plan that we've included this language where the no net loss has been achieved or not achieved?
No, I would say redevelopment of market rate affordable housing in the county has been pretty limited in the life of this county. Most of the redevelopment of multifamily has been done by actually affordable housing providers that are able to do that replacement, but they are, it's HOC, it's MHP at the residences at Forest Glen that are able to do that because they're mission driven, and it's very unlikely that would not be the case there.
Right, so we don't have any. We don't have any test cases so far.
Not in the master plan.
Not in the master plan.
So Councilman Joando, I just want to add that this is also a quarter.
Artie
plan.
Harris planning.
Yeah, Artie
chair.
Harris, planning chair of the Montgomery County Planning Board. This is also a quarter plan, and we have recommended, and I think you're taking up, there are many housing types that there's CRT, new CRT at nodes. Throughout the plan, there is even so we expect more development along this quarter that will add more MPDUs, right? You see at the Four Corners and all at the nodes where we're adding density, we're adding for more housing. So we expect to get more MPDUs at the lower income levels throughout this quarter. Okay.
And for the record, Jason Sartori, Planning Director. Two things I would add is that, this language is pretty new that we've been using in our master plans, and so we really haven't had much of an opportunity to see how it plays out in real life and with actual development applications yet. The other thing is that you have to keep in mind the scale. And the scale of development, some of what Ms. Gavoni was talking about was a much larger project, an existing larger building, where we want to preserve a lot of affordable units that might be in that building with a newer, larger building that's being built. A lot of what we're talking about here may be a single-family parcel with one single-family home that might redevelop into a duplex or a triplex. And it's a lot harder at that point to try to, require the same that we would expect of a much larger building where the developer can leverage more units and other properties and other opportunities.
No, I get that, but it's still, that doesn't help the person who might be displaced from that unit. I mean, it's just where they have to go somewhere, and I just think that's a problem that we have to have a better answer.
Yeah, but we.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Zubin Adrinwala for the planning department. I think one thing we have to recognize is that when a single-family home gets flipped by necessity, it usually becomes larger and definitely precludes somebody who probably was a renter in that house to come back.
I'm not in favor of that either.
Right, and I understand, and there is no mechanism
Yeah.
in the county or frankly most parts of the country right now to prevent that or address that. But if a single-family home converts into a duplex or a triplex, then you can have at least one unit at the price point that somebody who was a renter can now actually buy one of those units if it comes back at that price point, just because of square footages, right? So you can have, right now, I think we have a paucity of single-family homes which are at that sort of 1,200 square feet level, and they are disappearing fast, as you might have noted. So I think if you replace one of those units with, let's say, even a 2,400 unit duplex, then one of those units becomes possible where the renter who was there can actually come back and buy it as a relatively affordable, as in market rate affordable. Again, not a guarantee by any means. I think we are just playing the odds of the likelihood increasing.
Well, that would be great. But that's what I offered an amendment to the ZTA to say that would happen with the duplex development, and it was rejected, to say that if there was a redevelopment of existing market rate affordable, that one of them would have to come back, and not even at at the workforce. It was the workforce context. I think that would be great. I would be for that. But but like you said, there's no guarantee and there's no mechanism, and that's why I'm asking about this language, to say that that's what we expect to happen. I agree financially it could happen and it should happen, but there's no mechanism for it to happen, as you just said.
I think the mechanism for the duplex or the triplex for it to be more likely, again, not an official mechanism, but the possibility that it comes at a more affordable rate, whether it's as a rental unit or as a purchase unit, it becomes more likely for a simple reason that the square footages are smaller. So even if you go from a sort of higher per square feet rate, the fact that you have access to a unit which is slightly smaller to purchase with the advantages.
That's the whole theory of
Right.
that you make something smaller that you can get a more affordable price. But again, why can't we say that it has to be? That's just my.
I think.
That's
I mean,
what
I
I'm
think
trying to get
the idea is also about equity, right? Which is to put the burden of creating affordability on somebody who's a single-family homeowner today. So our hope is that it's single-family homeowners who are in the corridor today and probably have a need for an upgrade or need for tapping into the equity in their homes potentially, and their only avenue right now is either selling the house or debt. This is a third avenue for an existing homeowner today who could probably who has a 1,200 square feet house, wants to live in the 1,200 square feet house. If they build a duplex on their own property and the avenues are easy with a lower regulatory burden, then they can become a homeowner, potentially a landlord on their property. I think to put the sort of regulatory burden on an existing homeowner today of creating affordability seems burdensome. And again, I'm so I think the language that we have in the CRT, adding more MPDUs, I think that's the stronger language where we can get affordability at a complete entry level. So the first-time graduate, the new teacher who moves to the county, some of that. But for somebody who's an existing homeowner, somebody who has a home right now, I think this is an opportunity for first creating value for people who are existing homeowners that they don't have to move out. Because I'm a single family owner in the county. If you ask me, hey, build a duplex, but make sure that the other unit is regulated at a lower price point, that's kind of burdensome on me with my sort of, barely 20% equity in the house right now. So I think that's the sort of issue.
Yeah,
we don't think we should put the onus on single-family homeowners right now to do this. That's the consideration.
I get your point. I mean, I think the most likely scenario, frankly, is that the homeowner sells it to someone else who's going to redevelop it and then sell it to put two new units at the full price. That's probably the most likely scenario. I don't think I would love. We did ADUs. I was here for that. Like, we would love people to stay and then sell it, have a small lower price unit next door. But I don't think that that's what would be most likely in the scenario. And again, we're not encouraging it anyway. I appreciate the discussion. I will see. We don't have any examples of Strive for. I would just ask that when things come before the planning board, I think what we've done in the last 6 months is going to make more of this much more likely. That you're going to see these things come before you, and I really think you got to push. And I'm glad to hear from Ms. Gavoni that DHCA you believe they still have some authority to negotiate rental agreements and the like. I am concerned about this problem, and particularly in this corridor. And I think we just have to really push. When you get an application, that Strive has to really mean something. And I'm saying that to you now. I know we don't have a lot of test cases, but I think we will between the ZTA and this. So thank you for your indulgence to my colleague.
Councilor Fani Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the questioning from Councilmember Will Jawondo. At the end of the day, we all want the same thing, making sure our families are able to afford to live here in this county. This is why I'm proud to have led with Councilmember Fritzen, the ZTA, the Corridor ZTA, which really looking at the math, because at the end of the day, numbers don't lie, people do. So when you do the math, having 3 units and having a triplex to have one of them being workforce is key to ensure that we have more affordability in our communities. I'm just going to share one comment that I received from a resident who lives in my district. She owns her home on one of the corridors. Okay, I actually said this to a press outlet the other day. And when she found out about the Corridor ZTA, you know what she said to me? This lady is about 70 years old. She said, my daughter is 29 years old. She's a teacher, okay? She cannot afford to buy a house in Montgomery County near her school. You know what they're gonna be doing now? She's gonna team up with her mom, and they're gonna be building a duplex right next to her mom's house. There's gonna be a house right next to hers. What a beautiful thing. We're not displacing, this is a Latina immigrant just like me. We're not displacing anybody. We're creating opportunity. So now her mom gets to stay and gets to build a house next to hers for her daughter to live there. That's what we're doing in this county, and I am so proud of that work. I think the language that we're being presented today is similar to language that we have done in the past, and I'm gonna stick with it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Just a question, do we have the data on renter versus owner-occupied homeowner on the single-family properties?
Yes, we do. So we can send you this information, follow up in an email, but we looked at it for each of the scenarios, the planning board draft, Councilmember Friedland's, and then all single-family detached parcels. So in the planning board scenario, there was 512 parcels that were being proposed to be rezoned to CRN, and of the 512, 14% are not occupied by the principal owner. As we've mentioned before when we were doing more housing now, is that we use this as a proxy for renter households. It's not perfect, it could be a second home, but generally speaking, these are occupied by renters. This is pretty similar to the plan-wide number of about 12% of single-family detached parcels are not occupied by the principal owner, so pretty similar. It's in the first scenario, the planning board draft, so 74 parcels are not occupied by the principal owner. And I can send this information in a follow-up email to Ms. Dunn.
Okay, if you could follow up with that under the different scenarios, I think that'd be helpful just for the full council to understand, which would be helpful because I think it does change a little bit of the context of what we're talking about and what are actually directly impacted by this. But I think we have belabored this point. I think we're ready to move forward. I appreciate the comments and the questions. And so without objection, we will move forward. We did adopt the council staff recommendation on this.
Thank you. There is another recommendation here which actually follows from this conversation fairly well. And it is that we have had in other master plans an additional recommendation, especially when we have large multifamily buildings of a certain age, as we have one or two in this plan area. And it's the recommendation in the middle of page 3, and it is, in the event of redevelopment, priority should be given to existing eligible residents for the units under market affordable rental agreements. Property owners should work with MCDHCA and tenants so the eligible residents receive support and assistance to mitigate the impacts of any relocation. And that's, again, something else we've done, and I think it just supports the experience that Ms. Scavone has talked to and that we're trying to achieve.
This speaks to what Ms. Scavone was saying. It speaks to the broader concern I think that Councilmember Giwando was mentioning, but not related to the single-family homes, which is the primary focus of the conversation, but more to the multifamily properties and the concern there, which is really where the flexibility exists for this type of recommendation. But we've done this in previous plans, and I think it's appropriate to do it. And this committee has supported it previously, so I think that, without objection, we appreciate the recommendation, and we'll go with the council staff recommendation here. Just important for us that the language is consistent with the previous language that we used in other master plans. So let's just check on that and confirm that. But I think without objection, we'll accept. So, great.
Thank you. The next section we're going to cover are parks, trails, and open spaces. The UBC plan does not recommend any new public parks. While the plan area is generally well served by parks and trails, there are opportunities to enhance the existing parks, including providing new access points and new facilities or amenities that are needed in this area of the county. The recommendations under parks and open space tend to be broken into different parks, so we'll cover them that way. The first is Wheaton Forest Local Park. Those recommendations are on the 4th page of the staff report, and they are to improve the pedestrian connections from the adjacent Pomander Court property. One we've already talked about before, which is language that occurred under the urban design recommendations, but is occurring here as well, is consistent with recommendations elsewhere in the county. properties adjacent to parks redevelop in lieu of on-site open space require a financial contribution from the property owner for park improvements. The third recommendation, redevelopment of adjacent properties should relate to and engage the park and ensure that the park edges are attractive. There's another sentence, for example, do not locate parking lots or dumpsters immediately adjacent to the park. Fourth recommendation, investigate options and opportunities to create more shade for park users and especially for athletic field spectators. The fifth is to consolidate the two entrances of this park. We are talking about Wheaton Forest Local Park. The two entrances to the parking lot into a single entrance. And then last, create a paved trail loop in the park that goes around the athletic fields to create a clear pedestrian bike connection through the park and to the residential neighborhoods. Council staff suggests the committee support these recommendations. Given the comment from the committee, we had during the discussion of the urban design and the desire to reference the zoning ordinance regulations as it relates to contributions, there's an edit to that second recommendation here. It's toward the bottom of page 4, and it actually is exactly the language that the plan uses for another park in the plan area. So those references will all be consistent, and they will all reference the zoning ordinance.
I think the reference, similar reference to the other recommendation makes sense. Before we get to that, though, the quarter plan is a little bit different than other types of plans, and I'm just wondering how the financial mechanism would be viewed. Like there's oftentimes in CBDs there are amenity funds and other dynamics where the financial contribution for parks is very clear, and we know where it would go. Is there a could you just share with us what planning's expectations would be in terms of where the financial contribution would go and how it would be utilized?
Sure. Henry Coppola, Parks Long Range Planning Supervisor, for the record. So I think the way that the zoning ordinance sets it up, it speaks about it a little bit more as a specific project that could be done as part of the development project, in which case it could just be under a park construction permit and not necessarily a specific payment. In other cases, when we need to take a payment, we set up a specific CIP PDF that can handle it, that's labeled normally with the master plan's name, because the goals under the zoning ordinance, of course, are always to have that offsite improvement take place within the same plan area. So it needs an extra step.
So either there's a specific project that is occurring simultaneously, whereby the financial contribution can be, a developer contribution towards that, or a new CIP would be created, or one will have been created that is plan specific to ensure that the funds remain within the plan boundaries.
Correct.
Okay. I think that it's just something that came up. It is a little bit different in a quarter plan than it is in a traditional, central business district or something of that nature. And so I think that's helpful for us to flesh out. Okay. There's a staff recommendation on the language. Any comments or questions? Without objection, we'll accept that. Councilmember Fani-Gonzalez.
I'm excited about the recommendations. I spent years on this park with my kids, and I just wanted to commend you and thank you for being so specific. And yes, we need to get the money to be able to fund them because they're needed. So thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the second recommendation, bottom page 4.
Great, thank you. The language for that redevelopment adjacent to the properties should relate to and engage the park has the additional sentence of, for example, do not locate parking lots or dumpsters immediately adjacent to the park. And then if you look at an aerial view of the parking question, Wheaton Forest Local Park, there is the Palmander Court townhouse development beside it. They do have some parking that is, you would call that adjacent to the park, and yet they've screened it with trees. So council staff has just suggested a slight softening of the language, that in case you want to strive to not locate dumpsters or parking next to parks, but if in fact you have to. And part of the motivation for this is, we have these quarter plans, we're thinking of infill and redevelopment. It may be more restricted in the way it can locate things within its property, especially when we're doing redevelopment and not greenfield sites. So just a slight change to make it something we want we don't want the parking lot or the dumpsters right there, but if you have to put, say, a parking lot there to screen it.
Great. Any comments, concerns, questions from Parks or from Planning? No? Anything from colleagues? All right, without objection, we'll accept that recommendation.
Great, thank you. Now we're going to move on to Sligo Creek Stream Valley Park. There are several recommendations, again, related to that park in particular. It has the first one, which is related to the Northwood Presbyterian Church property, which we know is going to eminently be redeveloped, and that is to improve the bicycle and pedestrian access and connection between University Boulevard and Sligo Creek Trail. The next recommendation involves the Northwood Chesapeake Bay Trail as it passes through Sligo Creek Stream Valley Park. The plan recommends management of any unimproved portions of the right-of-way be transferred to Montgomery Parks by the appropriate mechanism to consolidate management and maintenance of the trail. The next is to relocate the playground between Sligo Creek Parkway and Sligo Creek just south of the University Boulevard out of the floodplain. Fourth, continue to treat and improve stormwater discharge from non-parkland sources into Sligo Creek and its tributaries. Next, improve its passage in Sligo Creek by reconnecting the stream under University Boulevard. Next, improve the Sligo Creek Trail entrance at Kent Mill Shopping Center with further language related to the redevelopment, which we suggest removing. And then create a paved trail connection for people walking, biking, and rolling between Wheaton Lane and Sligo Creek Trail. So council staff does suggest the committee support these recommendations with the minor edit under that second to last recommendation. I think you'd want to retain that the Sligo Creek Trail entrance to the shopping center improve. You would just remove the piece related to the redevelopment.
Okay, any comments? Without objection, accept that recommendation.
Great, thank you. The next park facility that is in the staff report is at the top of page 6. It's the M.SHA land and the Northwood Chesapeake Bay Trail. And the recommendation is that the parks assume and management of this, that they consolidate the maintenance and management. There is language that this happen as soon as possible. That's the only question that council staff had about this. Typically, we think of master plans as long-term visions. We love to have things happen quickly. We don't know whether they can or can't. This is also an area that is fully under public domain, so really it's up to the public entities how fast that occurs. Just seemed a little odd to have as fast as possible in a master plan.
I understand where you're coming from. I also think that oftentimes we misdirect the frustration with master plan implementation on private property owners and not enough on the public sector, that oftentimes, more often than not, are the main culprits in failing to deliver on the promises that are made. So I get where you're coming from. I don't necessarily disagree. I also don't necessarily have a problem with some urgency on the public sector side, even though we're fully in control along with the state. So I don't have strong feelings here. I'm happy to go along with wherever colleagues are, but did just want to note that I think the public recommendations, public property and public control recommendations of master plans are important, and I think we do not do as good a job as we should in actually following through and implementing what master plans say. And as seen in this particular master plan, as in many, there are a lot of energy and a lot of effort and a lot of concerns that are raised and addressed during this process. And for us not to follow through on the public sector side, we can't control the private sector side necessarily, is an area of frustration for many. Any thoughts, colleagues? Councilor Gonzalez.
I actually agree with council staff that to say as soon as possible is pretty odd on this, to add that in the master plan. I will remove that. I understand the urgency. It just doesn't make sense to put it in a master plan. Imagine 25 years have passed and somebody reads that. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I'm fine with council staff's recommendation to remove it.
Sounds good. Well, 3-0. We'll remove it without objection. I don't have strong feelings either way. I think they're going to view it 25 years from now and see that it didn't happen, whether as soon as possible is in there or not, and say that the government failed to deliver on what they said their vision was. And they rightfully will be frustrated and should hold us accountable, or whoever is in these seats accountable for that period of time. But with that, we'll accept the recommendation. The as soon as possible is assumed here and doesn't need to be written. So let the legislative record reflect that we expect as soon as possible, and we don't need to necessarily write it. Let's continue.
Great, thank you. The next park that we'll cover is the North Four Corners Local Park. You'll see, again, 5 recommendations there in the middle of page 6 to improve pedestrian connections adjacent to the HOC property. Again, that language related to contributions, and again, we'll make that consistent, although this one here has a further caveat, that is, if the project provides 25% or more MPDUs that receive either an exemption or discount from development impact taxes, the contribution may be reduced proportionally. We'll talk about that in a minute. The third recommendation is redevelopment of adjacent properties, again, should relate to and engage the park and ensure attractive edges. We'll make the same comment or adjustment there that the committee has agreed to. Investigate options and opportunities to create more shade for park users, especially athletic field spectators. And then last, engage residents and community stakeholders to identify an appropriate long-term lease for the currently vacant park activity building, one that contemplates the park and addresses community interests and needs. So circling back, the second recommendation, again, we can make the language consistent, or this is actually the language we recommended for the prior park. The piece about the 25% MPDUs and changing the way that the contribution is calculated really would be a zoning ordinance issue, not in a master plan. If the committee feels strongly that they want to investigate this, there's 2 things to consider. One is this a more global change that the committee thinks would be useful for all properties with a 25% MPDU contribution, in which case that would be a more global change to the zoning ordinance. It would happen under the open space section of the code. If in fact you want to take a slower step, which is you want to consider it just for this plan, this piece could go in the overlay zone. My comment here is it's just not appropriate to be just in the master plan because it's a regulatory.
Yeah, agreed on not appropriate here. I personally think, and this committee has previously taken the approach of the global versus the overlay. Generally, when things like this have come up, and we just did the public benefits, question. I mean, that was a way that we tried to address some of the global dynamics with some of these. So I would personally suggest, and I'll open up to colleagues, that we ask planning to come forward with how this could be implemented on a global scale as a policy matter, and what the appropriate mechanism would be in order to do that. I don't think it's necessarily controversial, but I do think the mechanism here does matter. I'll open up to colleagues for their views on it. Council Member Joando.
Yeah, I agree it's not appropriate here. Happy to have any future conversation on a potential reduction for something we think we're getting extra, but I want to evaluate it and look at it in the proper context. So I agree with the recommendation not to do it here.
Okay, and I'm hearing agreement from Councilmember Fontaine Gonzalez with thumbs up if the tape showed that. I think it did. So we'll remove this here, and we'll welcome the planning board and planning department to send over suggestions, recommendations on how this could be implemented on a broader and more consistent scale, not site by site and plan by plan.
Great, thank you. We're going to move on. Pinecrest Local Park.
Could I just ask one question before we move on? The last bullet talks about the engaging stakeholders about the long-term lease of the currently vacant building. These buildings are really important for communities. They are sites for birthday parties and for activities and gathering spaces. Could we just get an understanding of how that's being used and any plans that are currently in the works? I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong necessarily with the language as we have it here, but is there a reason why this would have to be leased out, or why it can't be used as a publicly available space, and what thoughts have gone into it?
Sure. This park activity building, the reason this recommendation is crafted this way is it had been in a long-term lease that ended. Actually, I think after the sort of public engagement portions of the plan. And so we wanted to sort of acknowledge with this language that it's not currently in use and that the building should be. I believe every so often we sort of study and look at the use of PABs and sort of what the distribution is and which ones are being rented a lot by the public and which ones aren't and might be better served in a long-term lease. And the last time this one had been investigated, that was the case in the decision that was made. We could easily add a tweak here to just say identifying the appropriate long-term use here to include returning it to a PAB, and
Yeah, I was just going to
investigate that as part of
Yeah, I was
this.
just going to recommend that, to leave open the possibility that this be used as a public amenity space as opposed to just, a lease. I don't think we should predispose that, certainly not for 30 years. So if we can adjust the language, if colleagues agree, it would be engage residents and community stakeholders to identify an appropriate use for the currently vacant park activity building, one that complements the park and addresses community needs and interests.
Great.
If it's a long-term lease, no problem, if that's what the ultimate determination is, but if it's not, I think the master plan should reflect that. Okay. All right, great.
Great. Thank you. All right, we will now move to Pinecrest Local Park. There's one recommendation to add interpretive signs to educate visitors about the historic Pinecrest Recreation Center, which council staff suggests the committee support.
Without objection.
Great. And then last in this chapter is new open space recommendation. This plan recommends new publicly accessible open spaces on key properties, such as the WTOP and the Safeway sites, should redevelopment occur in the future. And council staff suggests committee support that as well.
Without objection.
Great. We'll now move on to the chapter on environmental sustainability, and just note that many of the existing land uses in this plan area have been in place for many years, and they reflect both positive and negative environmental attributes. The positive attributes include mature tree canopy and in lots of the older established residential areas and the parkland. And some negative environmental conditions are associated with the autocentric land uses, such as the multi-laned University Boulevard, numerous driveways, and surface parking lots. The environmental recommendations are broken into categories as well, and so we're going to cover the first one, which is develop University Boulevard as a cool corridor. And there's a primary recommendation here to design a multimodal transportation spine along University Boulevard that gives people who depend on walking, biking, and transit protection from extreme heat and air pollution, and then gives several bullets underneath that of ways to achieve this multimodal cool corridor. The one in here that we have is that council staff calls out is the underground utilities along the corridor were feasible. And again, we have had this discussion in prior master plans as well, and have changed to using the term where practicable, knowing that, anything's feasible, but it may not be practicable to do it. And so just suggest that one slight tweak.
Okay, without objection.
Okay. The next category we have is to protect and increase tree canopy. The recommendation is to protect and increase forest and tree canopy along road rights-of-ways and on public properties. To work with MCPS and other owners of large properties with significant impervious cover and little tree canopy to reduce heat island. And then areas of surface parking lots on public and private property should provide at least 50% tree canopy coverage of the parking lot area. If it can be demonstrated that the tree canopy cover cannot be achieved, the remaining coverage requirement can be met through installation of solar canopies. It's all very ambitious, and council staff again chooses the word where practicable instead of feasible, but suggests the committee support these recommendations.
Agree with the council staff recommendation. Before we dispose of it, just what's the comparison of the 50% number to other plans?
We have slowly moved to the 50%. I think the last plan we did was 50%, but in prior ones, it was a jump to go from 25 to 35%. What I will note, though, is I believe this will occur also something that will be placed into the overlay zone, because the standard, I believe, is 25% in the code. So when the master plan doesn't make a different recommendation or have a different requirement under its overlay, I believe it's 25%. So a 50% coverage is quite ambitious, and I think we may only have one other plan that is that high.
Yeah, obviously, tree canopy is critical, and it's been a major topic of conversation as part of this plan of wanting to address the tree canopy for health reasons, for safety reasons, for livability reasons. 50% is a very aggressive, ambitious number. So I think the language here is helpful. Colleagues, Councilman Fonda Gonzalez.
I wholeheartedly love this recommendation. I think we do need to be ambitious, and saying 50% is we're feasible. It's appropriate. If you're not ambitious to put for something like that, you're not gonna get it. And I in my dreams, I see University Boulevard and Georgia Avenue as a boulevard. I know it's called University Boulevard. Let's make it a reality, because right now it's not. It's like a highway, and it shouldn't be that way. And I think this will make a huge difference, and so I support it. Thank you.
Okay, without objection.
Great, thank you. The next category we have is to mitigate excess runoff and to protect stream water quality. There's 5 recommendations there. They promote the use of landscaping to help reduce runoff, minimize impervious surface and site design for developing and redeveloping sites. During development or redevelopment of private property, provide a minimum of 35% green cover, which is different than tree canopy. And then landscaping using native plants that require less watering and fertilization, and then use of nature-based climate solutions to incorporate carbon into landscaping soils to promote fertility and vegetative growth. All of those support this recommendation to mitigate excess runoff and protect stream water quality. There's another group. I'm taking these in group because there's no recommendation for changes to them, if that's okay with the committee, and then we'll circle back with any questions. The next is to promote public health, which is to provide opportunities, as you can see, they're for exercise, recreation, mental well-being, include features and designs for major arterial roads and highways to include noise mitigation elements wherever feasible, provide access to healthcare facilities, provide opportunities to buy or grow fresh produce or healthy food choices, and promote an environment that minimizes light pollution. The next category, the built environment climate recommendations, to make attainment of net zero carbon emissions an aspirational goal of all new development and redevelopment. Include as many of the following recommendations as reasonable in development plans. So you'll see there that there are numerous recommendations related to use of native vegetation, on-site renewable energy, orientation of buildings to support passive solar, building design that feature cool roofs, encourage improvements in facilities to reduce carbon emissions, promote site and building design to conserve energy and LED certification, and over parking areas where trees cannot easily be planted, consider shading features that include solar panels. And then lastly, promote native species. There's 2 recommendations related to planting native vegetation and incorporating multiple layers of native vegetation and landscaping. And council staff suggests the committee support all of these recommendations.
Without objection? Sounds
Great.
good.
Next are the chapter on community facilities. There's a broad range of public facilities already in this plan area. They include 3 elementary schools, 2 high schools, and a fire station. They contribute to the community quality of life. The UBC plan has a recommendation that recommends retaining all the existing public facilities and supports efforts to co-locate new public facilities if needed in the future. More specifically, in reference to the Montgomery County Fire and Rescue, its master plan does not anticipate any new facilities in the plan area or the surrounding community in the long term. So the plan supports providing additional public safety resources if needed at publicly owned properties in the plan area, so a very general recommendation. The plan also looked at existing resources related to libraries. There are libraries in Wheaton, Silver Spring, Kensington, and White Oak, and accordingly the plan says these provide sufficient resources for the plan area residents. There's likewise the Wheaton Community Recreation Center that we all know is nearby, and the Silver Spring New Recreation and Aquatic Center, and they provide nearby services to residents. The plan area has existing child daycare services affiliated with several of its religious institutions. There's no dedicated senior center, but there are senior residential developments and a nursing care facility within the plan. So the plan only recommends that additional daycare and senior services as new developments occur in the plan area. Those be considered as part of the development review process.
Great. Councilmember Fonda Gonzalez.
I agree with everything but one thing that I'm hoping that my colleagues can support. And this hasn't been publicly said, but I'm just gonna say it because I have the opportunity. I, as the district council member for District 6, as you all know, we have the oldest police station in Montgomery County. That's Police Station District 4. You know, the police stations in the council districts have different numbers, and it gets really confusing, but that's another subject. I am working with the Department of General Services and the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, specifically the Parks Department and Mr. Ari Harris, of having a co-location of Park Police, which is Park Police and District 4 Police are very close to each other. They're like a few blocks away from each other. They're not in this master plan, okay? The location specifically. They are on Leahy Road. So the idea is to build a brand new station for the two of them, co-locating them. So having a joint police stations. The upcoming CIP that we're gonna be having is gonna reflect that. And I think in this particular section, we should bring to light that work. So I will say perhaps the language should be recognizing that District 4 Police Station is in pretty bad conditions. I mean, you can come back to us with that right language, but I'm just putting the ideas out there. And the need of having a brand new station is there. And one suggestion, maybe you can put it that way, is to have a co-location between Parks Police and County Police to be one site it's in Glenmont. But since you're mentioning that here and that station serves this corridor, it's important to at least mention that. So that's all I'm gonna say, and perhaps I think that the most appropriate thing for you guys is to come back with language that reflects what I'm telling you. Not that I need it on the master plan because this is already moving forward, but I think we should, since at least I know that this is moving forward, we should at least reflect it here. That maybe you can, like I said, maybe you can say it as, since we know, like I said before, since we know that we need a new District 4 police station, we should consider relocating Parks Police and this police station in one site with a brand new station or something along those lines.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to have language of what that would refer to. So I would suggest if it's okay with you to ask for the language to the full council, which I think makes sense. I feel like I agree, and I think it's a good direction to go in, but it'd be helpful to have the language in front of us. So why don't we get the language back and have that included when this comes to full council to reflect what Councilmember Flanagan Gonzalez is requesting. Any other comments on these issues? Very important that we look after the youngest and the oldest in our community, key priority of all of ours. So the focus on that is important. So.
Great, thank you. We will bring the language before full council. Moving on, the last part of the community facilities chapter discusses school capacity, and according to plan, there is school capacity at all levels due to the reopening of the Charles Woodward and the Northwood High Schools, and is anticipated to be able to accommodate all the growth that the plan expects over the next couple of decades. We have seen that there is, in the coming years, there's the potential for decreasing enrollment. And as it stands now, there is no recommendation to remove any of the schools or to not use any of the school facilities currently in this plan area, although some are operating at below optimal and efficient levels of utilization right now, but that could change. So it's the status quo right now is fine with schools.
Okay, without objection.
The next chapter we have is the chapter on historic resources, and there again there are several segments to this. The first one we're going to cover are the historic resources that are listed in the master plan for historic preservation. They have already been identified, they've already been designated, and they are in the master plan. With respect to those, the plan recommends protecting and preserving these resources as listed, to educate property owners of the historic properties, of these historic properties about the benefits of the Historic Preservation Tax Credit Program and to promote the adaptive reuse of historic properties while retaining their character-defining features. That
Without object, Councilmember Mink.
Hi, thank you. The public hearing draft also had we talked about this a little bit before, but the Woodmore Shopping Center as identified to be evaluated for potential designation, so I would appreciate if we could add that back in as well.
All right, that's in the next section that we're covering. Yes, the next section is the historic.
All right, so without objection, we'll take up the committee staff recommendation, and then now let's move to the next section, which includes what Councilmember Mink was referencing.
Correct. The next is historic resources recommended for designation in the master plan for historic preservation, and the plan recommends designating the Romeo and Elsie Horad House, and again, supports promoting adaptive reuse of historic properties while retaining their defining characteristics. And as Councilmember Mink has requested under this section, requested to put back in the Woodmore Shopping Center for evaluation. Is that correct?
From the public hearing draft?
Yes.
Yep. Without objection? Yes.
Great, thank you. In our follow-up, as that was a conversation piece that we had when we were talking about follow-up items, you'll see that exact language farther into the staff report. We have brought it back. The next section is to evaluate the following resources for designation in the master plan for historic preservation. There are several Jewish facilities in the plan area, synagogues, schools, and institutions. So several resources to study, and the plan recommends, in addition, to complete a countywide historic resource context for architectural and cultural resources associated with Jewish residents in Montgomery County, and then to evaluate sites associated with Jewish heritage for listing in the master plan for historic preservation. So two separate levels. One is a countywide recommendation. One is to really look at and evaluate the sites in the plan area. And then the second major piece of this is to look at the Buddhist temple in the area, again, to expand and develop a comprehensive historic context for its building, to conduct outreach to the property owner to discuss the benefits of historic preservation, and then to evaluate the Buddhist temple for potential listing in the master plan.
Great. Without objection, strong support of this.
The only comment that staff had was related to the county-wide recommendation for the historic resource context for Jewish residents of Montgomery County. It seemed to me that this was a master plan for the corridor, and so a county-wide recommendation seemed slightly out of place. I think it could be better served as a work program item for the planning department so that it actually rises to a level of conversation and focus rather than in a corridor master plan.
Agreed. The committee would like to request, without objection, that the planning board and planning staff consider this as part of their work plan, which would be a more appropriate way to address it as opposed to master plan language. We could include master plan as part of a countywide, but I don't think we even need to. I think we just strike it in the master plan, a reference to countywide per council staff recommendation, but ask that planning review this as part of their work plan moving forward and get back to the committee and ultimately the council on when and how this would be implemented and on what timeline. Okay, great.
Right, and we're still retaining the other recommendation related to the sites within the plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
That stays.
Absolutely.
Okay. The next category we're going to cover are burial site inventories. Montgomery County's burial site inventory recognizes the significance of cemetery and burial sites in the community. There is one listed burial site in the University Boulevard Corridor Plan area, the Good Shepherd Episcopal Columbarium. The plan recommends, per Ordinance 1831, that it preserve and protect the burial sites during the subdivision review and approval process. So should the Good Shepherd Episcopal Church come in for redevelopment, that will be something that would be considered during the development review process. Oral history suggests that the Carmack Family Cemetery may be located in the vicinity of the northwest section of the WTOP transmitter property. And because of that, the plan recommends to consider the possible impacts of the cemetery location as warranted during development review. And again, according to county code, preserve and protect burial sites during the subdivision review and approval process.
Without objection?
Great. And then there are burial sites that are recommended to be listed in the burial sites inventory. So these haven't been officially identified and placed on the inventory as of yet. There is an undocumented burial site approximately near the intersection of Caddington Avenue and Whittington Terrace. It's a family burial ground for Captain John and Lucy Adamson. The location is considered approximate because there are no visible remains and historical records do not specify an exact location. So the plan has recommended to update the burial sites inventory to list the approximate site of this burial ground and consider possible impacts during development review. And again, according to code, preserve and protect the burial site during the subdivision review process. And council staff suggest that the committee support these recommendations, but would like to better understand any implications for the recommendation for this last piece. For any residential homeowners, you can see on the top of page 13, this approximate burial ground is listed a block into a residential detached house neighborhood, and I'm unsure what that actually means to have it designated.
Let's talk about it.
Good morning, John Labor's Historic Preservation staff. So the burial ground is a approximate location because we don't know the exact position of the former burial ground. And so on the map, the site is placed within the public right-of-way, which is our standard approach for cemeteries with unknown boundaries. And so there are no regulatory requirements for any current property owners absent a preliminary plan of subdivision. And so if one was to come in, since that location is approximate, additional steps may be required. There could be additional archival research, archaeological investigations into the area where we think there's the highest likelihood of containing a burial ground, and potentially monitoring during any type of excavation of the ground itself. And all these efforts are made to determine whether a cemetery boundary can actually be established, which is pretty rare in these instances, though, however.
Okay, any other questions on this? Any concerns from council staff based on that response?
No, I was mostly concerned with the redevelopment of a private property. Say it did want to develop into a duplex or triplex in this location, what would be required? And it sounds from Mr. Liebert's that it would, it would be something that the department would look to see if there were any ground disturbance. Possibly there would be minimal, or it would be far back from where this is approximately located in the right of way.
Yep. Okay. Without objection.
Okay, we have a chapter on racial equity and social justice in the plan. It is probably the largest chapter on racial equity and social justice we've had in an area master plan. It is quite extensive, and the plan's approach to racial equity and social justice, not only is it critical to the plan, but it does follow from a requirement under county code, and the plan applied an equity framework that is based on the planning department's own internal equity peer review group. They've established an equity peer review group of all master plans as they are being developed. And in addition to that, the group uses an equity tool based on the Government Alliance on Racial Equity, or GARE, recommendations. And this tool involves working through a series of steps and answering questions, and it's an iterative process. And as they go through that, they look at desired results, analysis of data, community engagement, strategies, implementation, communication, and accountability. And what the chapter does is it provides for you information on each of these steps that they took as they went through and developed their recommendations. So the first was desired results. And according to the plan, one of their primary results that they hope the plan would achieve is an equitable community, which would depend on access to a diverse range of housing options, safe and accessible transportation options, parks, trails and open space, community facilities, and services. Desired outcomes to realize this vision include, and then you'll see there are 4 major things that the plan addresses to try to achieve this, which is increased housing diversity, including affordable and attainable housing to accommodate residents of all abilities, income levels, and stages of life, improved travel options and transportation access through facilitating future BRT and multimodal networks, enhancing the environmental sustainability, addressing urban heat islands, and increasing access to green spaces concurrent with the county's climate action plan. And then 4th, ensuring the historically disadvantaged communities along the corridor are included and acknowledged in the planning and decision-making process. So that's the first step they lay out. The next is analysis of data, who would be most impacted by the plan. To achieve equity through the plan states it's essential to understand who is most negatively affected by current conditions and future development trends. And looking at the analysis of data indicated that the plan area has a racially and ethnic distribution much like the county. The differences include a slightly higher share of Hispanic and Latino and Black African American residents in the plan area and slightly smaller share of non-Hispanic, white, and Asian residents. The plan area is below average in terms of median and average household income and per capita income compared with the county. And certain neighborhoods along University Boulevard face limited access to essential amenities, including parks and retail establishments. The geographic disparity is exacerbated by a reliance on public transportation, particularly among the lower income residents. So they framed it, they're thinking about that, and then they have the next section related to community engagement. There's quite an extensive appendix to the plan, which outlines all of the engagement that they took, and you can see it all summarized here in the first paragraph. And the outreach efforts were really designed to specifically engage the communities. I don't know if the committee recalls, but we have increasingly provided more funding to the planning department for support of master plan work. And one of the primary reasons for that is because they do contract out assistance so that when they want to engage in the community, they can get people to help them canvass. They don't have the staff to do their own canvassing, so they do it under contract, and they have done it in the last handful of master plans, and it's been very effective. So I just wanted to note that is something that's been deliberate and thoughtful on the council's part and the planning department's part as well. The next is they look at strategies. These are recommendations to mitigate any burdens or maximize any benefits. And again, you'll see several recommendations related to that. There's a lot of text here, so I won't go into all of it, but it really sets up how they established each of the chapters in their plan, the land use and zoning recommendations, urban design recommendations. You'll see there's quite a bit related to housing. It really lays out how they focused on each one of these items: the parks, trails, open space, environmental sustainability, transportation, community villages, and historic preservation. And then there are two final pieces to this. One is called implementation. The plan, it says, seeks to ensure greater accessibility and benefit for all residents, both current and future. And the key to accomplishing this is to ensure that the recommendations listed are implemented through meaningful action. Much of that occurs during the process of planning review, the regulatory things in our code, and our public commitment to public resources and public lands. And lastly is the communication and accountability. According to the plan, it envisions greater systems of accountability to ensure the goals of racial equity and social justice are consistently advanced through the public and the private improvements in the plan area, noting that the planning can play a crucial role in monitoring, coordinating stakeholders, and fostering transparency in future decisions. Council staff's comment on this is, one, it's incredible. It was the biggest, like I said, chapter we have received on racial equity and social justice of any master plan to date. And the only comment really had to do with the last segment about monitoring and communication and accountability, that the plan would benefit from a few more concrete explanation of how the planning department and planning board will track progress related to racial equity and social justice, not just that they can do it.
Can we talk about that first, of what that would look like and what you would intend to bring back? I don't think we need to agree on language right now, but I think it would be helpful to understand, and then we can open this up more broadly.
Sure. For the record, Zubin Adrinwala with the Planning Department. So I think we have a framework of a response to this. What we can start to do is establish baseline data at plan adoption. So we have sometime in the next few months, once the plan is finalized, we can establish baseline data for the plan along with the county baseline data. That way we have a sort of a moment in point data for the plan, and then set benchmarks and milestones. So we can come back and define certain benchmarks for things like housing access, service accesses, representation, and then maybe schedule a kind of a milestone review for every 5-year period. We can look at some metrics that our research team already tracks in some cases or has access to. This may include, but we haven't finalized this list. This will require some internal conversation, but it could be number and share of BIPOC people in the geography, home ownership rates for BIPOC communities, number and share of people living in poverty is an important metric, home ownership rates for family by poverty status based on the ACS data, potential tax delinquency rates can also give us a peek into if there are displacement concerns growing. Means of transportation to work is another metric that we can track. And then what we can do is take these metrics and create a dashboard that might sit on the plan page to say, these are the metrics we are tracking. And then as for the accountability and adjustment metric, every 5 years, we can review how this aligns with what we think are feasible, realistic goals, and then have a conversation about implementing potential programs or address gaps. And then, of course, the county council can take action at those specific points.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. If you could flesh that out and put that into writing and have us look at something to formally adopt, I think, every 5 years makes sense because you need it to be long enough to actually understand what the implications are. So, by December 31st, 2030, December 31st, 2035, 40, and so on and so forth, I think makes sense. Let me open it up to colleagues. Councilmember Drawdown.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think we should be I think that, that's super important. I mean, Jan Marie Pina is here, and if with the chair's permission, I'd ask her to come down.
Sure.
She's a core component of this plan, which we're going to come back to in the other follow-up items, is the decision point to upzone the corridor. And that is, the mechanism for doing that is through ZTA 2512, which will actually implement that. We have a racial equity requirement for all ZTAs. This ZTA, which I'm going to ask Ms. Pina to describe briefly, came out as a negative impact on racial equity because the core component and concern around that is displacement of Black and Latino homeowners who disproportionately, and renters in this community. And you just mentioned looking at property tax delinquency. As soon as this plan is passed, if that goes forward, the property values are going to increase pretty dramatically. And that isn't, and one of the reasons, and I don't want to steal your thunder, but I think that's one of the reasons why this had a negative racial equity impact. And I just think we got to talk about that. One, it's a little Twilight Zone-y to me that we're not talking about it more, considering this is like a core component of the racial equity statement, and we're in the racial equity section, and it's not even really mentioned. And there's no strategies to mitigate it. We talked a little bit about some earlier. But Ms. Pena, could you talk about why you all came to that assessment and the unique characteristics of this community that led you to that?
Sure. So Jan Marie Pena, Office of Legislative Oversight. So we wrote the Racial Equity and Social Justice Impact Statement, like Councilmember Joando explained, on the overlay zone, and the provisions of the overlay zone do depend on the proposed rezoning of the parcels that line, or that side the University Boulevard corridor, changing those zones from R60 and R90 to CRN. And so for the impact statement, we did consider what the racial equity and social justice impact of that change could be, just because the overlay zone does depend on that. And so what we did find there is that we acknowledged that changing the underlying zoning from one that's single family by right to multifamily could advance racial equity and social justice, because it is undoing exclusionary zoning, which has historically made communities unaffordable to Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. But we did also see that based on the specific demographics of the area right now. So what we looked at specifically the demographics of homeowners who live in the University Boulevard corridor plan area, because we saw that they were the ones who would be most directly impacted by the proposed rezoning. And we did obtain data from planning that showed that the demographics of homeowners in the plan area, that basically that Black and Latino homeowners in the plan area were or Black and Latino residents had higher shares of home ownership in the plan area than in the county in general. So based on that, we did assess that this underlying rezoning could disproportionately displace Black and Latinx homeowners, because the rezoning could bring the development of basically market rate housing that, wouldn't necessarily be affordable to Black and Latinx community members at large because of lower income levels. So that is what we found there. So happy to take any questions.
I appreciate that. I mean, again, this is one of my core concerns in the plan, and I know it's not an intention of anybody, but I think it could be I don't ascribe intent here, but I do think it could be an outcome that if there aren't protections in place, which is what's frustrating for me. And I know there's always a balance of how do we balance something wanting to happen, like generally, the smaller unit types like we were talking about earlier, which I think is generally a good thing and it could work some places, but making sure that the current homeowners and renters there are not displaced. And it's great to say that you're going to come back with something to potentially track that for 5 years from now, but like it troubles me that like we're talking about coming back. Like it was the largest racial equity section ever, but the main concern from this overlay zone was this issue. And it's just like it doesn't seem to me that we're seriously taking it serious in a real way, because there's nothing really there to mitigate it. The language doesn't require, as we talked about earlier in this conversation. And I do fear that that's what will happen here. People will either be priced out. If your property tax go up, which we hear all the time from residents, your pressure is to either sell to someone to redevelop and move, or what else are you going to do? If you're a renter, you have no choice in the matter. And I just think whether it's 75 homes, I think another thing we should track, if there's 75 homes that are potential rentally owned, we should be looking to see what happened to those 75 parcels, like directly. That should be part of the plan if this goes through. It's so, I see folks want to respond, which I would love to hear, but I really am concerned that I don't feel we have any anti-displacement policies in place here, other than saying we're going to track it after the fact 5 years and see what happened.
So again, for the record, Jason Sartori, Planning Director. There are a couple of things here that I'd like to talk to. First, as OLO pointed out, inclusionary zoning is a racial equity and social justice best practice. And to that end, this plan does a number of things. One, by increasing the required number of MPDUs. That is our inclusionary zoning program in the county. And also by expanding the type and the ease with which a property owner can develop their property with different types of housing. It removes the exclusionary aspect of many of our zones. The other thing that we need to look at is the fact that new development in general, the idea of increase in our housing supply, that puts downward pressure on prices and rents. And so this is an area of the county where we haven't seen much new development in decades. And when you don't see development, you run the risk that you run the risk of some other concerns coming in, where we have concentration of poverty or deteriorating home quality, a number of different things. And what we've actually seen, our research has shown on displacement. Displacement is not as big an issue in Montgomery County as it is in other parts of the region, and that's in large part because of the policies that we've put in place. Our concerns here are things like concentration of poverty. What we've seen is where we've actually had development, new development across the county, we have seen inclusive growth. Inclusive growth meaning that an increase in both higher and lower income populations. We've also seen where we've had new development that in Montgomery County that we've seen increases in both the Black and the Latino populations. There's also this question over owner versus renter. Displacement is a bigger issue that you have concerns over when you've got high shares of renter populations. Owners get compensated when a developer purchases their property to redevelop it. And as Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez noted that the benefit to those property owners is that they have increased opportunities of what they can do with their properties. But again, the biggest threat to displacement for homeowners is not more flexible zoning, but rather increase in property taxes, particularly for fixed income retirees, and a variable rate mortgage where interest rates are increasing. So those are the things that for a homeowner.
Right, and this could increase property tax.
Well, so here's the other thing is when we reached out to the State Department of Assessments and Taxations about this previously, they indicated that property assessments are not based on zoning, not based on what's allowed to be done on a property, but rather based on comparables of what that property is.
Once something is done next door.
But a duplex would be compared to a duplex. A duplex is not compared to a single-family home that might be twice the size of that duplex. So it's based on comparables. It's not based on what is allowed as a result of zoning.
Right. And so I appreciate the feedback there. And I remember the discussions we had about displacement, particularly around Silver Spring and some data that you all had shared. I don't think the renter issue, there's a lot of issues going on. There's the Warwick, there's the apartment building issue where there's no guarantee there. There's the issue on the single family, which disproportionately is Black and Latino here. I think it's just, it warrants more of a area of concern, particularly in this corridor where these are already affordable areas and homeowners where people have, and then that's on top of, the community engagement concerns, that we've heard, and that being said, I've been here for the whole development of what Ms. Dunn talked about, the increased community engagement, which I will say you have done. The type and quality and from who you're hearing from is always a challenge, right? And what we're actually talking about when we hear from those folks is always a challenge. And I think we need to continue to refine there. There are, 1,600 plus people, probably all of them don't live in the area, but on the change.org petition about this plan, that's continued to grow. Through the course that say don't do this plan, and many of them do live in the area. Again, I think we have challenges there. And I just think when you have a core issue, you're basically saying in a nice way that those concerns aren't valid because for X, Y, and Z reason. If that's your view, which it is, we should be having some real in-depth talking about it. I shouldn't have to raise it with you right now and get kind of secondhand, sure. This happened in this last report and this and that. And it should be like a community conversation. This is like one of the core issues. For me, it is the core issue. One of the core issues of the upzoning concern, which is a core issue of this plan. There's a lot of good things in this plan. We all want better walkable. We want less heat islands. We want more traffic safety. But I just really, really, I just feel like I'm in the twilight zone where this is a core issue of the plan. And I have to raise it on the fourth session of the last day to say, what's the data to say that racial equity statement is not valid? I think that's crazy. And I know you're saying it now, and I appreciate it, and I work with you all a lot, but it doesn't seem like you're taking it seriously when that's the response.
Thank you for your comments. We do take these comments very seriously. And I just think that one thing that hasn't been mentioned is the status quo. The status quo right now is you can tear down a single-family detached home.
Well, which is not happening in this corridor.
But this is a long-term plan, and we see that that's changing throughout the county. What used to be an entirely Western county phenomenon is now transitioning to the eastern part of the county. And I don't think you can have this conversation without mentioning
the status
quo.
Tear downs are not great, but one of the things that the racial equity statement that Ms. Penny said that tear downs are uncommon. And again, let's talk about the data. If you see the trend moving, let's have that conversation.
And she's right. We provided them the data that there's been less than 5 teardowns in this corridor as of now. But as we know, this is a long-term plan. I think that it would be best if we could come back with a memo of compiling with some information that I think would kind of set a baseline for the status quo, the data that we've done on neighborhood change, the information that we received.
I would love that.
Then we can provide that information in the next version. I think that, we do take these comments very seriously. Displacement is a huge issue, but it's not a huge issue in this quarter right now. But we understand the concern, and I think that it would be best if we could come back and.
Yeah, and it's not an issue right now, and I want to keep it that way. That's the whole point.
Right.
And I would love further strategies. I am begging for, is there other things we can do, like the requirement, like the conversation we had 40 minutes ago, where we put some level of requirement or stronger language to prevent this issue. I'm not saying don't change the zoning at all or don't do it. I'm not in that camp. But I'm in the camp of how do we put real anti-displacement strategies in place and push us to probably have to innovate, because that's what we do, and do things that maybe aren't happening in other places. So I welcome that conversation. I feel like this is an important core part of the plan, and I appreciate my colleagues' indulgence on this.
Councilmember Fana Gonzalez.
That was a lot. I would say I look forward to that document that you have stated so we can move on. I will say that, again, assumptions, so wrong. And the fact that we still lack critical thinking and understanding that folks want opportunity. I just gave a beautiful example that I'm keeping track on this particular family that will show that they're gonna add a duplex in their home so they can stay. And they're Latinos, they're immigrants, we're creating opportunities. Otherwise, people cannot afford to live here. But again, the assumptions, what a disappointment. And expected, but highly disappointed. I think that the planning board has done an incredible job. I mean, just the fact that this particular section on racial equity is so detailed. We have never done that before. I have been a witness of the engagement processes that the planning board with the planning department and the parks department have done throughout the last, 4 years. I have participated in those meetings. I didn't wait until this particular session to complain. I actually was on the ground, seeing them do their work. I've been talking directly with people, Latinos and African Americans, me directly, because I don't wait to get here to complain. I don't do that. I held meetings, my own meeting, okay, and have follow-up meetings with people. I went to playgrounds and talked to people, asking them what they want to see in their community, because the community has been neglected. It has been neglected for years. So the status quo or not do anything, not upzoning, not touch anything, is not a solution. And it's disappointing to hear it. So I just want to reiterate to the planning department and the planning board, I appreciate you. I don't always agree with you guys. I mean, Ken Mills Shopping Center, really, it should have never been there. But anyway, we removed it. That's just one thing that I have to say. But I know that you guys care, and I know the engagement has been there. And I know that we're going to be moving forward, creating opportunity, not to neglect moving or changing anything, because we believe in our closed minds that that's the answer. That is not the answer. I'm moving forward and empowering my Latino community. And if I had the power to do that and give opportunities for people to stay and have their families move in and stay, I would do so. So with that said, I have nothing else to say. I support what's in front of us. I look forward to more information, because I will never say no to more information. And that's it.
Thank you to colleagues. One, I'm just glad that more information will come forward. I think that's going to be really helpful. I'm glad that there was clarification on the property values immediately increasing dramatically, and how the property value assessments actually work was clarified, because I think that's an important point that we've heard raised quite a bit, and a realistic concern there, and actually understanding how the assessments work through the State Department of Assessments and Taxation, I think is really important for us to clarify. So I think it would be helpful for us to include that in the packet specifically as we talk about it, because that has not been, written out and formally noted, and I think that is a major area of concern, particularly when we talk about the displacement question, when the overwhelming number of the properties, regardless of what we ultimately decide to do, are owner-occupied properties, not renter properties, which have a different dynamic when it comes to the potential risk of displacement. You know, I do think that there is a challenge here, and it's in the racial equity social justice report itself, and we heard it described today, where on the one hand, it's a best practice to do what is being done here, and the quote is, as noted in the Res J policy handbook, exclusionary zoning policies, quote, increase the cost of housing and make them unaffordable to many BIPOC residents. Eliminating exclusionary zoning is recognized as a best practice for advancing Res J in housing. So on the one hand, this is advancing what is identified as a best practice in housing. That's what we're hearing from planning. And on the other hand, there are concerns based on the dynamics here and what the impacts would be. And this is really the rub in every single dynamic and question that we have on zoning changes. On the one hand, we know what is a best practice, but moving forward with that best practice can lead to challenges and unintended consequences, and it's a very nuanced and difficult dynamic. And finding the balance of that is difficult and is challenging and is frustrating and can be very understandably confrontational. And so I want to center us in that dynamic, that this is not a binary question of if you do one thing, it's bad, and if you do another thing, it's good. Even within the Res J statement itself, it speaks to the nuance of this specific dynamic, that the status quo is bad and change can have challenges. And figuring out how to navigate that change, not the what, but the how, is important. So I just want to acknowledge that. I think this is a much more nuanced dynamic than we often talk about it in that regard, and I think that's really important to note. I did have a question on the Res J aspect. Most of the Res J was focused on the land use recommendations. Could you just talk a little bit about the Res J analysis on the transportation recommendations along this corridor, because that was a key focus area for planning as was presented to us in terms of this being one of the most heavily utilized transit corridor in the state of Maryland and in the county, and who benefits from that, and what some of the recommendations are intended to address. So if you could just speak to that, I would appreciate it.
Sure. So for the RESJ impact statement on the ZTA, we focus specifically on the underlying rezoning because the specific provisions in the overlay zone depended on that. So that's why we didn't look at other aspects of the master plan and what impact that would have on racial equity, just the underlying rezoning.
Okay, thanks. I think it's important to note that is unfortunately a missing piece, because it's not in the overlay zone, but it is a major component of the master plan itself. Just wanted to note that as part of the conversation. I appreciate you clarifying. Let me turn it over to Councilmember Mink.
Thank you. I just wanted to note also, I think that this is a really important conversation, and that I'm glad that we're having, and I'm glad that we're going to be continuing it as well. And, I think that the example that Councilmember Natalie Fanning-Gonzalez brought up is an important one. And also, I have also heard from my own constituents along this area as well about their fears of not being able to afford to continue to live there. And so I want to make sure that I bring that to the conversation as well. Those are genuine concerns from folks, some of them on fixed incomes, who are really concerned that that changes made here are going to make them unable to afford to be able to stay in homes that they have, that they've been in for a long time, and they don't see other homes that they're going to be able to afford to move to and be able to stay nearby in the area. So those fears are real and genuine, and I think some of the conversation we've had today points to those realities. So I appreciate the conversation. I think the concerns are genuine. I thank Councilmember Vice President Joanna for bringing that up as well. And I know we'll continue talking about this.
Okay, thanks. I think we have some follow-up here. Really appreciate all the work that has been done and the extensive conversation that we have had. Let's continue.
Thank you. So I'm going to move on to the next chapter, final chapter, which is implementation. And the first section is section on funding, and the section lays out several state funding mechanisms that could be used to support the implementation of transportation improvements. It's primarily informational in nature. There is one recommendation, which is that the plan recommends roadway segments that service senior or multifamily residential or public institutions, such as between Dennis Avenue and Lorraine Avenue, and between Arcola Avenue and Inwood Avenue, should be considered as implementation priorities. And what I would note is that like most master plans, this guidance provides greater focus to a particular area of need that is common. It is a suggestion, but it does not necessarily bind an implementing agency, and so council staff suggests the committee support it.
Any concerns, comments from planning? I don't see any from colleagues. Without objection.
Okay. The next is a section on zoning and implementation through zoning, and this section provides general explanation for the translation of zones that were discontinued under the zoning ordinance rewrite, primarily the planned development zones and the residential townhouse zones. It also includes details regarding the plan's recommendation for the CRN zone, for the detached residential properties within the blocks fronting University Boulevard, and that will be updated to reflect the decisions that come out of the plan regarding zoning. So just to put a pin in that it basically explains the planning board's recommendation related to zoning, but it would explain whatever decisions come out of the council.
Okay.
And then there's a section on public benefits. And just one thing to note, so when the plan was being created, it was at the same time that the staff was working on the update to the incentive zoning and the public benefits in general. And so more information was included in this section related to that. Because that was ongoing work and had not yet been adopted by the council, it has since been adopted. So some of that information now actually exists in the code. It's not needed in the plan, so we don't want to have any confusion there. So there's two recommendations at the top of page 17. Staff just recommends deleting these as they are now covered in the zoning code.
Any comments from planning? All right, without objection.
Okay. And then the next, there is a lengthy section on the plan's recommendations related to public benefits. Staff suggests that the plan actually clarify whether these are the only public benefits, like other master plans have restricted public benefits to a certain category or a certain number of benefits, or whether these are the priority that they hope the board will seek when they get an application for review. I believe it's that these are the priority. I just think we just need a sentence or two to clarify that.
Can we hear from planning on that?
Sure. Hi. For the record, Jessica McVeary, Planning Supervisor with Montgomery Planning. Yes, when we were drafting the public benefits section of the plan, our intent with these, with identifying these specific public benefits, is that they would be priorities, not that they would be the only public benefits that could be considered. So we are comfortable with that recommendation from council staff.
Okay, so you're going to develop language here that reflects prioritization but not exclusivity.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
And there's agreement, so without objection, we'll
work with planning staff on
agree that language should be adopted, but the full council will have to actually approve
Great.
it and adopt it.
And
or
then
you can share with committee members beforehand, and we can note that. I think that might be helpful if colleagues are able
Sure.
to check it. So if you could share with colleagues in advance of the packet for full council whenever that comes, I think it would be helpful to say, the committee reviewed and agreed to language. Here's the language that was developed that's been reviewed by the committee. And then including the packet so that the public has time to consume it.
Sure, we'll
Thanks.
shoot for that. And then there's the last section, which has to do with the capital improvements program and fiscal impact statement. I'm going to turn that to Mr. Kenny.
Thank you. On page 148 of the plan, there are a list of recommended capital improvements program projects. This list is a helpful illustration of the recommendations in the plan, mostly the transportation recommendation. There's one parks project. These projects would likely not appear as such in the CIP, as a lot of them would be addressed by under broader umbrellas of projects that currently exist in the CIP. But council staff recommends that this is an adequate summary of the recommendations in the plan to show the infrastructure that's being recommended. And then if it would be helpful to go into the fiscal impact statement, which is included in the staff report as well. The fiscal impact statement goes through costs, mostly again transportation, one-time costs, for capital improvements, and then ongoing sort of maintenance and operating costs. If the committee believes that would be helpful to walk through line by line, or whether, it's attached in the plan, and it's there are price tags for each type of project. But
I think it's pretty clearly stated in the packet, unless colleagues need it to be listed out. I think we're comfortable with it.
I will note that there are a couple items that in the fiscal impact statement that may be a little different depending on the recommendations, and that in the CIP projects in the plan there are a couple related to the BIPA and the Kent Mill Shopping Center, things that we can clean up.
Yeah, I was just going to
before full
ask
council.
that once we have final recommendations from the committee, if these can be updated and noted for full council, and then ultimately full council may make further changes, so they may have to be changed again. But I think having the full council aware of where we are currently and what the fiscal impact is, so that it's updated to reflect where the committee landed, I think would be helpful. Councilmember Giordano.
Yeah, one of the things, not sure if it's here, but one of the things we asked earlier about and talked about in the transportation section was, what are the things that we can do immediately prior to redevelopment? And so how is that just really called out, and what the price tags are, and how so that's obviously something we've been asked a lot, and I know we've been talking about, and want to make sure that we say it everywhere and get all the information related to it everywhere we should, including in the CIP.
Sure. So this is reflected in the fiscal impact statement itself, not the question of timetable. So immediately, not quite sure. That would depend, as resources are available. But it does break down which projects would have which amount of cost divvied between county, state or federal grants, and then private in the case of redevelopment. So, for instance, the bus rapid transit projects would be public projects and would not, rely on redevelopment. And then, the new roads projects are listed as being, mostly private.
Right.
In the case of redevelopment, given that most of them are through existing properties, or would affect existing properties, and would make the most sense to happen in the case of redevelopment.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Let's move forward on to the follow-up items.
Yes, and with that, we do have some slides for you, because I think it'll be helpful with the zoning. And what you're going to see, so we do have slides, and I was very fortunate to work with planning staff who provided mapping for us and who did change some of the colorization. So the colorization wasn't changed in my staff report. I didn't have it the day the staff report needed to post, but we do have it on slides. So you'll see a slight change in the colors in these slides, but planning staff, Colin McNamara, was completely assistant and great in helping me with this mapping. I couldn't have done it without him. So the first one is a request by the committee to revisit the zoning recommendations for the R16, R90 detached residential properties to the CRN of 1, C of 0, R of 1, and a height of 50. As you'll recall, the committee came out of that very first work session having looked at the WTOP properties where this recommendation was made. And came out with 1, 1, and 1 on kind of options for how to move forward with this based on what the planning board recommended. So this is the planning board's recommendation. It's the one that's in the plan. The next one, Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez proposed a slight change in this, which was to rezone the same geographic area, the same blocks, and to limit the height to 40 feet. Councilmember Giordano proposed to not only to reconfirm the existing R60 and R90 zoning for those blocks, and to only rezone to CRT the properties that were the institutional properties. And Councilmember Friedson, Chair Friedson, sort of took a more middle ground and said to reconsider, to rezone the properties that abut the University Boulevard, the R60 and R90 that abut University Boulevard with a height of 45, and to reconfirm the R60 and R90 zoning for those properties that do not abut University Boulevard, and it looks like this. In the time since then, council staff's been working with planning staff, preparing to come back with follow-up. So you have two other options for you to consider, or not. I'll go through them quickly. You can throw them out if you'd like. It's
Might as well try.
No hard feelings here. The first one is definitely a combination of the recommendation by Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez and Councilmember Friedson. It would rezone those abutting properties to the CRN zone with a height of 45 feet, but it would retain the CRN zone with the lower height on the non-abutting properties. That's alternative one. I'm going to quickly, and then alternative two would be to rezone those properties that abut University Boulevard to the height of 45 feet. You would not rezone the non-abutting properties, but you could in the overlay, if you were concerned about prioritizing and making available other types of housing for people in this plan area, you could have under the overlay allow for up to 2 units per lot on those other properties. So it could allow a duplex, it could allow a standalone house and an ADU. You know, you would limit to 2 the number of units that could be built on those non-abutting properties, but you wouldn't actually rezone them. So that's just an alternative too. So this is up for committee conversation.
All right, and so just to clarify, if you could just very clearly state, I mean, I think the planning board recommendation is essentially no longer under consideration. There's kind of a modified planning board recommendation, which is Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez's recommendation. There is the reaffirming the existing zoning, which is Councilmember Jawando's recommendation, which with the of the single family lots, while moving forward with the institutional properties and the multifamily properties along the corridor. And then there's my proposal, which is to rezone the abutting properties at 45 feet. And then there's 2 alternatives. The 2 alternatives, I just want to make sure that it's clear, because I think it is hard to follow the difference between the 2 alternatives, whether or not they're considered or not. I just think it's important for folks to understand. The alternative 1 is to make sure that the abutting properties are at 45 feet, not 40. Yeah. So it's a slight adjustment to Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez's proposal, but to say the abutting property should be at 45 feet, not 40 throughout, because it was a blanket height restriction, to have a differentiation of that height restriction based on where it is. And then the alternative 2 is to create an overlay zone that allows additional housing option of no more than 2 units in the area that was covered by the original planning board recommendation, to say that the multifamily options of triplexes and anything above that would not be permitted, but that a duplex would be permitted if that were the approach.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right. Those are the options, alternatives. Let's open it up. Let's see if there have been changes or whether or not committee members are still where they started at the outset of this, or slight tweaks, and ultimately we can see where we're at. So let me open it up to colleagues. Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez.
I am here looking to compromise with the 2 of you. I'm just going to be very upfront. I think it's a mistake to go to the full council with a 1-1-1 decision. It's not going to help the body. We're the ones who are dealing with this from the very beginning, plus Councilmember Mink, who has joined us as a great guest. I think, well, for me, the only options are the 2 alternative options that I want to thank council staff for being so proactive in offering more options to us. I think that's speaks highly of you. So I'm open to either one, but I'm also open to going back to my preference or even the chair's preference. Just doing the sites that are, office or industrial. That's not an option for me. We cannot just focus on that. It has to be more than that. This is a sector plan. Okay, this is not anything else. It's a sector plan. That's our job. So, but I'm open. So I look forward to your comments and see where we should be landing. So I don't always say that I'm willing to compromise right from the spot. So be grateful, at least.
Right. Gratitude felt and appreciated. Let me turn it over to Councilmember Joanna.
I don't know about this form of compromise. I'm for everything but for what you want. So I appreciate the spirit of the invitation, but I don't feel the how it would work. Did we do any analysis of? I appreciate the maps and thank you for pulling this together. Of how many, what the possible build out could be under each scenario. Like, if you just, let's start with mine, for example, what that would mean as far as potential new units and types, because it wasn't just the commercial, it was also the multifamily that was included in that.
Okay, so we do have a lot of data from planning staff, and we have gone through it. I looked at some data, but I really, given that the conversation was focused on the R16, R90 blocks, that you're all in agreement about the multifamily, you're all in agreement about the institutional properties. So I had focused on that and pulled some data for that. There are
and that's the question I'm asking, I think, right?
Well, if you're focusing on the ones that we're talking about for rezoning here, we have that data. Not, again, because the committee is in agreement on things that are going to CRT. The committee is in agreement on the multifamily buildings going to CR. For the R16, R90, there's almost 1,800 in the plan area. 1,800 R16, R90 properties. The number that are recommended for rezoning to CRN under the planning board, or say under Commissioner Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez, or alternative one, around 520, close to 520 properties. If you look at just the abutting,
I think, is that the 512 from the original discussion that we had earlier?
Yes, I got 519, they had 512, so I rounded to 520, but it could be 500, 510. Okay. And then the abutting properties under Councilmember Friedson's scenario is about 165. So we're talking, the around 500 is about 29% of all our 16 R90 properties in the plan area. It is 15% of the properties in the plan total. So if you're including the multifamily structures, it's only 15%. Councilmember Friedson's suggestion, the 165 is 9% of the R16, R90. It's only 5% of the properties in the plan.
So we don't have any, I appreciate that. I wanted that information too, but we don't have the information on what would the build out would be possible under what we agree on, which is my proposal.
We do have that too. I'm sure that.
Yeah, we just talk. So we just understand the context here. I appreciate that. That is a portion of the story for sure.
Yeah, for the record, Zubin Adrinwala. So we did do some conversion and yield assumptions. So the underlying assumption based on the market analysis was that they would convert to a duplex is the most likely outcome. So I think the more straightforward answer would be like, if we just assume each one, then the yield becomes, in our scenario, with 512, you would have 512 additional units possible because we think that on an average, most of these would be converted to duplexes as the most likely outcome based on the current market conditions and the market analysis that we did as part of the plan. I do want to note that based on how many kind of unit changes we got, we did some analysis, again, starting with the original 500. And based on current rate of change, we think that if this is kind of easy to implement, then we're looking at about 15 units per year of change, of course going down because the the numerator keeps changing. So in the first year, if it is implemented as per planning board draft, we think that 15 units could potentially yield another 15 units. So from year 1 to year 20, in a sort of a best case scenario, market conditions being what they are and static, we think that over the 20-year period of the plan, we could potentially get another 700 units over the life of the plan in the next 20
You're
years.
just talking about from the R60, R90 conversions.
That's right. Again, this is sort of a very sort of linear assumption. We assume,
Yeah, just to, I
the
think
sky
what
is
he's
always
asking
blue.
for is
Yeah.
if we did nothing on the single family, so I don't want to put
Yeah, no,
words in
I
your
was-
mouth.
yeah.
What is the, what could be yielded at the institutional properties and the multifamily properties that we, that would be left rezoning if we
I
didn't
just
do
wanted to have that
anything?
on the table, yeah.
Yeah, I heard what you were saying. I just want to make sure that the answer is responsive.
Given that, if we could give him a minute to
Yeah, sure.
calculate that.
And there's
Thank
two
you.
standards of that. One, we significantly downzoned actually what was being recommended from 100 feet to 60 and 65 feet in a number of circumstances 2 meetings ago in most of those properties. So I think what was the planning board number, and if you don't have it today, at least to be able to come back, but what was the planning board draft number for those properties, and then what was is currently the committee recommendation on those numbers of what the yield of units could be in terms of net increase of units.
Yeah, and as colleagues know, I wasn't at that meeting and was on the economic development trip. And so I'm sorry if council staff thinks this is ridiculous, which I overheard, which I don't necessarily appreciate. But I'm just trying to get a baseline of, based on what we do agree on, what would potentially be built out. These are all estimates, which I understand. Even what you just gave are estimates. So I just want to compare the estimates to the estimates. And so if you need time, that's great. But that's the question I'm asking.
We'll need more time than we have for the session to just to
Absolutely.
okay, good.
Perfect answer.
Yeah.
That's
Well-
an acceptable answer. I'm just asking, just to drive home the point, which is important to me and potentially to colleagues at full council, that what we do agree upon will increase the housing supply in the corridor, and which is a good thing. And there are other options, as were said earlier. There's a lot of options here. We could allow different types, like a component of alternative 2, which at the end you could do that on certain areas. You could include some. I appreciate the more options, but there's a lot of things that could happen here. So I have not fundamentally changed my view. I think that information would be helpful to me, and I'm always open to getting more information as we head to full council. But the displacement concerns that I talked about, the infrastructure concerns that I talked about, going deeper in, and the fact that we just passed the ZTA that impacts portions of this corridor already, I just think we're kind of layering on before we even looked at what would happen there. So for those reasons, I think I'm kind of where I was.
Okay. Appreciate that. If you could come back with that data point. I think writing out as part of this the analysis of the 700 additional units and how you came to that conclusion and when you would expect that, I think would be helpful just to have in writing for the packet as we move forward. And then the allowable additional housing units. Essentially, what is the yield from the rezoning at highest and highest density use, based on your projections. Of course, all of these are estimates. All of these require property owners to decide to redevelop. That seldom happens, across the board 100% of the time, all the time, every time. But it's, helpful for us as a reference point to understand what is the universe in which we are discussing, and the planning board recommended versus, the council committees recommended, I think would be helpful as well, because we did downzone several of those to more realistic numbers, what actually might happen and might be yielded. I appreciate all the work that has gone into this. I think there are some thoughtful suggestions here that I think are improved options and nuanced improved options. But I do think I would be most comfortable sticking to the abutting properties at 45 feet. So, yeah. So, shockingly, the Jawando is for the Jawando option. Fritzen is for the Fritzen option. And Councilmember Fani Gonzalez has 3 options, 3 iterations of an option. So, ultimately, I'll yield to you if you want to, change, or if we want to move forward with 3 different options. I do think we should, several of these options are nuanced versions of the same option. And so I do think having one of those options, is fine to have it as a reference for full council, but I do think simplifying this to the extent that we can, if we can, would be helpful.
This is why women lead. The men cannot compromise, I'm telling you. I am not doing this to our colleagues in full council. And as you mentioned, and you were very right to say that, Chair Fritzen, there are nuances, very important ones. But I am going to vote on the option to only focus on single-family detached residential properties that abut University Boulevard, Birrizon to CRN with a height of 45 feet, which is the option that the chair mentioned. I'm not thrilled, but I understand the reason, and I do want to move forward, and so that's my decision.
Okay, so we have a 2-to-1 vote. I think it's important to be, as consistent as we can here. I understand the frustration and the concern and the interest in doing more and going further, but I think this is a thoughtful approach to address the issues and to be, consistent with recent decisions that we have made. I do think, a 2-to-1 committee recommendation, and I will leave to staff of how you reflect the other options that were reflected here as a reference. I would just strongly encourage as simple an explanation of the other options as possible and as consolidated as possible would be helpful. Maybe the planning board, comparison to the planning board, and then a recommended something that was suggested, one of the options to address some of the concerns as a reference. But ultimately, there's a 2-to-1 vote, 2 for this recommendation, one for the other. I think it's important that all the information be presented, but I just think consolidating it and simplifying it to the extent possible so that we don't overcomplicate this and make it harder to understand, not easier to understand. Let me turn it back to Councilmember Jawando, and then I'll turn it to Councilmember Bank.
And just agreed with that, and I appreciate it. And just, I think maybe even a chart of some sort, as you come back with this information, this would yield this would yield that, just make it really simple for colleagues, and then we can discuss the whys, but they know what's what.
Definitely. We had run these numbers before, but the committee's made a few decisions that have changed some of those numbers, including removing Kent Mill, so the shopping center. So when we, we'll put our heads together, make sure we update these numbers, and we'll get them to you.
Thank you. I think that would be helpful. Councilmember Bank.
Just noting for the record, I've said this previously, but that, I support the option that was brought up by Vice President Jawando, and I think that is what is responsive to some valid concerns held by my constituents, and I also appreciate the conversation and the work that the committee has done on this. I know that more conversation is to be had, but I think important to note for the record. Thank you.
Okay, well, we have a 2-to-1 committee recommendation and a lot of information that you're going to synthesize in a very clear, straightforward way that colleagues are going to completely understand and the public is going to be able to digest.
Thank you. The next item we were following up on was to provide alternative language for the urban design recommendation associated with Glen Haven Elementary School, and you'll see that on page 22 of the staff report. The planning staff have recommended that be revised to future improvements to Glen Haven Elementary School should explore improving safety for people walking, biking, and rolling for weekend community events to activate the existing surface parking lot along Inwood Avenue. It removes that idea that the school itself might redevelop.
Without objection?
Okay. The next is related to the Brewood Park neighborhood. It's revised the land use recommendation regarding the termini of Brewood Road and Tenbrook Drive for clarity, and you'll see that revised language at the top of page 23.
Appreciate the work on this. Without objection?
Okay. The next item that was requested, Councilmember Friedson requested information on the evolution of the current R200 zoning for the Collins Funeral Home. And planning staff did some looking and research into this, and what they found was that the Collins Funeral Home property was rezoned from R60 to R150 in 1966.
Thanks for looking into this. I raised questions about this. This is what I had thought and what we had talked about, but this confirms it, that this was a change from the zoning rewrite. It was rezoned to a certain R150 in order to allow for this use, and then got automatically rezoned to R200, which is an abnormal zone for this particular area. So thank you for clarifying that. Without objection.
Yep. The next request was just to take a relook at a handful of properties, and you'll see this in the next few things that we're following up on. And this one here in particular was, there were these 4 single-family detached properties between the Collins Funeral Home property and the Verizon property. Given the committee has a 2-to-1 recommendation, I'm not sure how much they want to go into changing any of these.
Councilmember Joanna.
Could you just remind me the existing zoning and what was the theory of the case here?
The existing zoning for the thing that's in the staff report right here, they're all R60.
Right, and so
here we go. Yeah, so this is a little complicated on the screen because I included the alternatives. I wasn't sure where we would land, so when I pulled up the individual properties, tried to give you a flavor for what would it look like under any of these different options. The Collins Funeral Home is being recommended for CRT zoning, and then the 4 detached houses plus the Verizon property would be converted to a CRN zone or not.
Got it. So since the committee went with 2-1 freezing, it would just be including from we all agree on that middle part except for that little bit of, there's 2 other parcels there, and then the abutting other side of University would be the.
Right. So the main difference here is that of the 4 single-family detached houses that we were really coming back to relook at, the 2 that abut University Boulevard would be rezoned. The 2 that do not would not.
Yeah. Okay.
That's before the committee or the council, plus not rezoning any of the 4. That's the other option.
Got it. Okay.
Without relitigating the prior issue, which I appreciate,
right.
Are there any concerns or objections with this? No. Okay. I think it's important that we went very detailed site by site on these to make sure the nuances were addressed. I think this clarifies that. I don't think there's any need for
right.
a
We'll
change
move
here.
quickly through some of these follow-up then, because I think they fall into that same category. The next was just again to provide the information related to flag lots. It was requested, like, how do the flag lots come into existence along University Boulevard? There's an attachment in your staff report on Circle 1. Here it is. That just the planning staff did a great job looking to find out when these were approved. They are all quite old, and they exist.
Okay, any questions, comments?
No.
Okay, thank you for the background.
Again, the committee requested to relook at the properties on the Northwood Park neighborhood, made up entirely of R60 zoning and single-family detached houses. Again, these were the ways in which the rezoning could or could not occur, and I think given the conversation that we're sticking with the 2-to-1, we know how this looks. Does anyone have any further concern?
Councilor Jordan.
Yeah, and the one thing that I will just bring up, and again, if you have something now or later, one of the things that we heard in public testimony, one of the things that I'm concerned about, not every part of the corridor is the same, and some things could work better or worse in some parts of the corridor based on the infrastructure, or based on where it's situated on the road. We did this, for example, with the street grid in Four Corners. You all made a lot of changes. We talked about others. On the zoning side, if there's just an open invitation, if there are anything, obviously I know you wanted, your initial proposal was to do all of it, but if there are distinguishing characteristics in these different areas that would make in your view, something more or less likely or more or less problematic. I think it's to get to that level of specificity this is the appropriate time if we were ever to do it in the corridor plan. And so I would just throw that out now, and it's an open invitation as we move to full council. I think it would make sense to look at it with that eye again, and just in full transparency, I think that level of like block by block, this could be different than that. It might work great here, not as it might be a challenge here. What does that make sense? Okay, yeah. I don't know if you have anything now, but it's just an invitation to.
Thank you for that feedback. Yes, Carrie Sanders, for the record, we will be happy to go over that with the full council and answer any questions you may have.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Moving forward then, the committee requested clarification on residential compatibility standards as applied to the Oaks at Four Corners property. You'll recall that's the HOC property, was recommended for a height of 70 feet, and wanted to see, first of all, just to clarify that when DPS or planning look at height compatibility, it is when it is a CRN, CRT, or CR property that is abutting a residential detached property that is vacant or improved with an agricultural or residential use, and as such, parkland is not considered either one of those uses. So just to clarify, CRN, CR, CRT property next to parkland would not have height compatibility imposed on it.
Okay, any questions or comments on that? Okay, let's continue.
Okay. And then the next committee members requested staff recommend language, additional language that could specifically address transitions in building height from the Safeway property to the adjacent residential detached properties. You'll see on page 25 is the recommended height from planning staff.
Okay, page 25, this is the number 10 on the follow-up items. Thank you for coming forward with this recommendation. I do think this, at least from my perspective, addresses the committee's suggestions and recommendations. Are there any questions or concerns?
The staff would just want to clarify, does the committee, in considering this language, want to make a recommendation on whether the height should be 65 or 70 feet? I think that was still up in the air at the prior work session.
Okay, let's see if committee members have any comments on this. Let's turn to Councilmember Mick.
Yeah, I would between those two, I would ask for the request of 65. Obviously, we do have residential properties there, and I don't need to rehash the same conversation we had before, but that is my position, remains my position.
All right, without objection, we're gonna go with the district council member's request here of 65 feet.
Okay.
And otherwise adopt the language as proposed.
Yep.
But with the height at 65. So 2.25, 1.5, 1.5, and height of 65.
Correct. Thank you. The next one related to the detached house properties next to the Safeway site is now a moot point because they are not abutting, and so they would not change. And we'll move on to 12. That's on page 26. These are the commercial properties that have the current EOF zoning with the height of 100 feet. At last I heard, we had not been able to reach the property owners related to this. We reached out several times. Planning staff, is that still the case? Yeah. So I don't know if the committee wants to retain the height of 100 feet. They did not reach the property owners. We can get back in touch with them.
Yeah, I still remain a little concerned with changing and reducing height. We're not adding height. I mean, that's a different standard, but I'll yield to colleagues on this one. I understand the concern, but ultimately, retaining the existing zoning is a status quo dynamic. Councilmember Fani-Gonzalez.
I was really hoping that you guys could touch base with them, and not having their input is really problematic for me, because we're not talking about, as the chair mentioned, of increasing heights. It's taking height away from them and not having them hear their concerns if they want it or not. I don't think it's fair. So I'm gonna stick with the staff recommendation of without reducing anything, just because of that. They probably won't ever do anything there. But the silence concerns me. So.
Okay, I agree. Councilmember Joando. I don't disagree. Councilmember Joando does not disagree. To repeat that. So it's a 3-0 committee recommendation, but it's a lukewarm one. Nobody's enthusiastic about it, honestly, because I don't think it's realistic. I think that's shared among committee members, but at the same time, I think there's a concern there of reducing, what is the current status quo. Councilmember Mink.
If I could just ask that we continue efforts to try to reach the owners before the full council session, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, if new information emerges before full council, then certainly it would be a good opportunity to revisit. Appreciate that, as always is the case, but unless and until that happens, the committee has a 3-0 recommendation. Councilmember Mink.
Did we ask the chambers to help us make contact? Okay, just wanted to check. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We'll continue to try to get in contact with them. And then the last follow-up, as far as my work is concerned, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Kenny, involves the Woodmore Shopping Center. We've already had this conversation earlier today, and it places back in the language from the public hearing draft related to the Woodmore Shopping Center and evaluation for its evaluation as a historic structure.
Thank you. Any comments from committee members? No. We'll go to Councilmember Mink.
Appreciate the committee for adding that back in, and also wanted to request that we retain the existing zoning for that shopping center, noting that the property owner there does not have any intention to redevelop. If that conversation changed way down the line, then we could look at a local map amendment at that time. But at this time, my understanding is that there is no intention. There are serious concerns from community members about the rezoning, and so I would ask that we just retain the existing zoning.
I'll just note that in the prior work session, it was a 2-0 for the committee to go with the public hearing draft recommended zoning for that site.
Okay, so we addressed this issue before. This language would reflect the 2-0 committee recommendation that we had.
Correct. It reflects the.
This is the public hearing draft language.
Correct.
Yeah.
And just related to the historic structure and historic evaluation, there was not a follow-up related to the zoning, and the committee landed on 2-0, recommending the public hearing draft zoning, which was a lot less intensive than the planning board zoning.
So the question is, first question is, are there concerns with this language, assuming that this is the direction that we're going in? No concerns with the language, so we'll adopt the language as put forward. And then the second question is, revisiting the zoning question. It seems to me that would be something that could be taken up at full council to address it, unless there's an interest from committee members to change the committee recommendation on the underlying zoning. Councilmember Duano.
Yeah, and again, I didn't vote on that one, but I would concur with Councilmember Mink, and especially with that information, that there's no desire to redevelop, that we just keep it the way it is. So if that could just be noted in the packet, if it's not a unanimous decision.
Yeah, you can reflect it as a 2-0 vote, and you can just, I would suggest, Councilmember Jawando has indicated that he would prefer to retain, when you reference Councilmember Minks, you can note that it was indicated, even though it's not a formal vote. That reflects your interest. That would also retain it likely as an opportunity to revisit at full council, should you wish to do it, which I would expect you would. So, okay.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it to Mr. Kenny now.
Thank you. So moving to the remaining follow-up items, which relate to the transportation portion of the plan. We have a separate slide deck for this item that we can bring up now as we get into these recommendations, and we have the proper staff join us. I believe this is it.
All right, and just to note, we're moving on to the addendum.
Yes.
So just so those who are following, we're moving on to the addendum, which is PHP Committee number 1 addendum, which is another document, and we're on the first page with number 1, clarifying language for 10 Brook Drive access road intersection.
Yes. So this is in the addendum to the staff report. which also appears on the council website. So the first follow-up item the committee had from its November 3rd work session, this was last week, was to clarify that the, so we have a map here of all the connections for reference, but to clarify that this proposed connection from the Tenbrook Road Access Road intersection would not actually continue all the way through down to Tenbrook Drive, but would instead end at the trail at the bottom of the Northwood Presbyterian property, that this would dead end and would essentially just be a site access connection.
All right, thank you. This implements essentially what we had requested. I don't see any concerns. Thank you for working together on the language. Without objection, we'll accept that. Let's move on to number 2.
Thank you. Following, the committee recommended changing many of the street connections recommended in the plan to be paved trail connections rather than vehicular connections. These were all of the parallel connections, as well as Royalton and Greenock Road, the intersection there. The committee requested that council staff work with planning staff to evaluate whether any of these roads, new recommended connections, would have particular reasons beyond just general vehicle throughput and broad goals of the plan for being a vehicular connection. Council staff and planning staff did not find any such particular cases where this would be required beyond the general goals of the plan.
Appreciate it. Committee essentially rejected the street grid recommendations, but retained paved connections to be able to have the pedestrian benefits that are really the core focus of the plan. So appreciate that, and appreciate you looking into this and recognizing that it seemed superfluous. I just will note and reiterate again, as we noted last session, that communities and neighborhoods can always request traffic mitigation and traffic control, requests from Department of Transportation to go in and analyze, and that is retained, and this does not address that in any way.
Right, and planning staff had brought up concerns regarding vehicular access to potential redevelopment of sites, including specifically the Masonic Temple site, but found that vehicular access to sites of possible redevelopment can be addressed through other means in development review, that these street connections as such are not
So without objection, we're going to take that out as is now recommended in consensus way. Let's move on to number 3.
Thank you. So also related to this, the committee's rejection of the street grid concept, or many portions of it, the committee also noted that the traffic calming language that went along with many of those recommendations could also be removed. This language is sort of boxed off in the
Same standards apply.
Without
objection, we can take this out because we've essentially rejected what was originally proposed and came up with an alternative that we think better serves the community and the pedestrian safety needs. Let's move on to number 4.
Thank you. So for number 4, this was talking about one more recommendation in the street grid and the street network recommendations. This was for the channelized right turns. The committee generally agreed with the recommendation, but was concerned that the language specified removing channelized right turn lanes, where planning stated that the intent was to remove the
channelization aspect, not the right turn aspect.
Right, not the turn lane itself.
I really appreciate this. This was my request. I really do think it actually reflects what was intended and actually reflects how it will be implemented, which I think is really important for clarity's sake, to reconfigure rather than remove the right turn lanes, and then to be explicit. This has been a key area of concern, particularly at Arcola and University of Boulevard, and I think there are some misunderstandings and confusion of how this would actually be implemented, and I think this does a good job of clarifying that, and I appreciate it. Any concerns with this updated language? Without objection, we will accept this, and thank you for your work on this language in particular.
Thank you.
Number 5.
Thank you. Moving on to the I-495 interchange recommendations. The committee requested language to clarify the priority order of the first and last bullet of the long-term recommendations for the I-495 interchanges as a 40-degree, or rather 90-degree intersection and a grade-separated crossings would not both be implemented. This is an either-or. Council staff worked with planning staff on the language contained on number 5 in the addendum to clarify that this would be the recommendation is to reconstruct interchange ramps to conventional 90-degree intersections instead of merge lanes, consistent with guidelines, and then also second, install grade separated the grade separated crossings as that are not reconfigured as traditional 90-degree intersections. So go for the 90-degree intersections where that's not where that doesn't happen. Go for the grade separated crossings, which are more cumbersome in terms of infrastructure.
Great. I don't see any objections. So without objection, we will accept this. Let's move on to number 6.
Thank you. This is one where there's a little more discussion to be had in terms of where the committee would like to end up. These are the evaluating options for the Four Corners Street Network. During last week's work session, council staff presented 3 options. The planning board draft, which would in phase 1 add bus lanes and in phase 2 widen the right of way to include pedestrian and bicycle facilities. Councilmember Mink's proposal, which would retain the existing number of travel lanes and not increase right of way, and would come with some modest pedestrian safety improvements. And then the public hearing draft, as was recommended by council staff and planning staff was supportive, to repurpose 1 travel lane in each direction to construct low stress facilities for those walking, biking, and rolling. The committee decided not to proceed with the planning board draft, but requested additional information regarding sidewalk buffers, street trees, and standards for pedestrian facilities in order to better evaluate options B and C. So the table on number 6 does specify sort of, and it is an illustrative model of what each of those options would look like, the existing, and then options B and C. And the staff report also includes some more information. Happy to walk through this. There's also some images that planning staff have provided to better illustrate what these sidewalk buffers look like. Essentially, Councilmember Mink's option B, does provide some buffers. So it creates 7-foot buffers in some locations, and has 3 block faces with 5-foot or narrower buffers. This is Councilmember Mink's proposal. And then option B also provides minimum of 5-foot sidewalks, with some sidewalks being as wide as 10 feet. Option C, by repurposing a travel lane, creates much wider buffers. With having 7 to 8 foot buffers on all block faces, which is consistent with the Complete Streets design language for soil volume and tree canopy, as we talked about in the environmental sustainability section earlier in the plan today. And option C also provides a minimum of 8-foot sidewalks as well as a 16-foot breezeway. That's the range. And these are consistent with the bicycle master plan and the Complete Streets design guide. So essentially, we have one option that provides some pedestrian benefits, but that don't reach the guidelines and the standards that the county has, but maintains the currently 3 travel lanes in each direction through Four Corners, as well as all turn lanes. And then option C, the public hearing draft, which gets us up to all of our Complete Streets and safety and Vision Zero guideline widths between buffers and sidewalks, but does repurpose a travel lane, which has some modest traffic impacts as we walked through last work session, but it does also provide some Vision Zero benefits of its own by shortening crossing distances which was a separate recommendation that would need to be tinkered depending on where the committee winds up here. So I hope that's helpful. We have some additional images here and MCDOT and planning staff here to comment as well.
All right, let's hear from MCDOT and planning on the two recommendations, and then let's open it up to colleagues to discuss. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Alex Rixey, for the record. Montgomery Planning, Acting Supervisor for the Transportation Planning, Multimodal Transportation Planning Team. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I think council staff did a great job of summarizing the differences between the two proposals. Just to reiterate again, this, in particular, the sidewalk that is on the southwestern corner of Four Corners, as we mentioned previously, is a location where lots of students are boarding and loading buses, waiting to cross the street to get to Blair High School. The sidewalks are particularly narrow. That's also the specific location where, under Councilmember Mink's proposal, that's a modification of the Phase 1 Planning Board, would only provide a 2-foot buffer in that location, and so that's really narrower than we would recommend from a safety perspective. The other option C provides a full 8-foot buffer, and the breezeway facilities, which, as council staff mentioned, are a recommendation of the bicycle master plan, and that much wider facility is really important to allow people riding bikes to pass each other in both directions while also not conflicting with people walking. So it really provides dedicated space for all of those users, which today there are already large numbers of people walking, biking, and rolling, all of those users to interact without conflict.
Great. Can we just talk specifically, and this was referenced, but in terms of the buffer and what's the impact of a smaller buffer and a larger buffer, because this is the suggestion in general, but it's not necessarily the case throughout the corridor that we're talking about here, not the full corridor of the plan, but the corridor that we're talking about here, the area that we're talking about here. And then, specifically on tree canopy and where you can put a tree and can't put a tree. And then what impact does that have? Is that just about tree canopy and shade and, heat islands and the other dynamics that we're trying to address, or is there a safety component that you're trying to address? I think that's kind of the key point here of, what is about safety and what is about aesthetics and, level of comfort versus life and death.
Thank you, Carrie Sanders, for the record. Actually, I think the council staff has a few slides in response to your request from the last session. This is actually a really helpful slide because you can see a 2-foot buffer is really unsafe, and we would not recommend it as planners, not only in Montgomery County, but nationally. Mr. Rixey actually sits on a national committee for safety and Vision Zero and provides data on this at a national level. And it's local officials, and I'm sure you see situations like this all throughout the county, and we in a master plan, it's unacceptable for us to recommend something that is this unsafe at 2 feet. We have situations where we have folks both walking to school, we have vulnerable users, we have seniors, we have children that are trying to cross the street as well. So we would not recommend something this narrow because it doesn't allow a lot of room for error. Let's say somebody's in a wheelchair and that wheelchair hits a bump. We actually had a video about this that we presented earlier where someone had this situation, quite tragic, where they hit a bump and they are ending up in the highway. So we really feel that wider buffer is absolutely necessary. We understand that might result in some inconvenience in terms of traffic. However, we note that it is rather marginal. It's not a significant increase in traffic. And what it does do is really create a safer condition for all people on the sidewalk as well as those on their bikes. And I actually think a few slides down, we have some examples of where we have this in place in the region. Thank you so here's an example of an 8-foot buffer. So this is in the Rock Spring area where the 8-foot buffer really provides that safety. It also provides area for soil volume so that trees can actually thrive. And that's really important for equity because we need these trees to provide cleaner air for the children that are in this area, as well as for others that are trying to traverse through the area on foot, reach the local businesses, So it's important to equity. It's also important for public health. So we really feel this 8-foot buffer allows us to get those trees. And actually on the next slide, you can see a 10-foot buffer, which is really ideal because that allows even more space for the soil to kind of keep those trees in good condition. We do have some national and local examples on the slides following, where you can see, sorry, just a bit further down into the presentation. Thank you. So you can see an example of this in DC, where we have a breezeway next to a sidewalk and we have a planted street buffer. And then we have another example that is in the Midwest, which shows this type of condition in a wider street, where we're really able to have safer areas for children and our vulnerable users. So I think from our perspective, as professionals that are looking to make the county safer, we really feel strongly that this buffer needs to be 6 foot wide or greater in width. And we need to have the sidewalks also in line with our complete streets guidelines. And I think this will really help the council implement a vision that is very well needed for the area. Pedestrian safety was probably the largest concern we heard from community members, so we feel like this would really help address that through the plan.
Appreciate that. Let me open it up to colleagues. Councilmember Fani Gonzalez.
So last time we talked about this, I was actually very clear. I went on and I said, I like to go back to the public hearing draft. I said it. It's not in this particular report. It should have been said. My decision, and I will stick with it. There's no way I'm going to approve a sector plan that will set us backwards. It's not happening. Like, in my view, this plan is mostly on transportation, on mobility, to ensure people can walk, bike, roll, take transit, and drive safely. If we don't do that, then what are we doing here? What a waste of time. Besides that, we're already doing the Vero Smith Corridor sector plan being implemented with BRT. We already have discussions of making sidewalks wider. So why am I going to do it? Why is it going to be okay for me to do it on Vero Smith Road and not okay on this sector plan when I'm the council member in both? There's no way. I think the public hearing draft is a great compromise, and I'm looking forward to voting on it.
Thank you. Councilmember Dronda.
Thank you for this work. That's really helpful in combination with the pictures and the chart, and appreciate council staff and planning and DOT. Would like to hear from DOT, but before I do that, I just want to make sure we're all singing from the same choir sheet of what these numbers mean. So you mentioned the 2 foot buffer, which is very narrow, but obviously in the packet it says 2 to 5 feet. I'm assuming that means at different points along the block, but could you just clarify that and how much are we talking about? Because obviously there's a difference between 2 and 5 feet, right? And let's all be very clear. Right now, that corner is 0 to 0.5. Like, there's nothing there. So we everyone's for slowing people down, which the lane narrowing does. And if you've driven on Connecticut Avenue, you know that with speed cameras slows people down. So that's a good thing, and I think everyone's for that. And we're all for making the sidewalks bigger and making the buffers bigger. The question is, how do you balance that, and what value do you get both environmentally but also safety wise? So could you answer the 2 to 5 where that is? Thank you, Mr. Kenny.
Sure, thank you. So we see up here the sort of sample cross sections, and this would vary a great deal along the corridor. There are different points that have different rights of way as property lines shift a little bit in turn lanes, and there are some differences, but this is an illustrative kind of middle of the block, adjacent to the Safeway property. And this is in Councilmember Mink's proposal, essentially.
So to the left, this is what it would change it to. One of these isn't current. Which one's current?
They are neither are current.
Yeah, these are what it would be under Councilmember Mink's proposal.
This is correct. This is what it would be under Councilmember Mink's proposal. And in the diagram to the right, you can see it's small, but there's on the left-hand side of that diagram, there's a 2-foot buffer separating the roadway from a 10-foot sidewalk next to the Safeway site. And this is just a function of the right-of-way being quite narrow, and you can widen the sidewalk a little bit, and get some
And
buffer.
then on the other, the reason it said 2 to 5 is because on the other side of that same street, it's a 5 foot.
2 to 5, where those hyphens separate one side of the street from the other in the chart.
And then, so this is eastbound versus westbound. On the westbound, it's obviously a better situation. Eastbound, it's much tighter. And that would be along the whole portion of that road. That's what that dash means. It means 2 on this side of the road and 5 on the other side of the street, excuse me.
Right, so the sidewalk buffer would be about 2 feet along the entire block face on the eastbound University Boulevard between Lorraine and Colesville. So that block face that has the Safeway currently. That's what that is referring to.
And 5 feet on the other part of the street, on the side of that street.
Right.
That's of that same direction. Got it. Okay. And then the other question I had was related to, do we have any data on what going from 12 feet lanes to 10, 11 feet lanes, how much that slows people down? And then my next question will be, does DOT have any view on any of this? But do we have any data on that?
We can come back to give you some specifics, but we know that as a general principle, just engineering wise, once you narrow the lane, it's going to slow speeds. But I don't know offhand if there have been studies to specifically sort of determine like what exactly the before and after would be. We do know.
I'm interested in that for future too, because
I
think there are places where we could probably just slow people down now where the infrastructure might not change. You know what I mean? Like I'm curious about that as a general proposition, but specifically in this corridor.
We do know that when you have what we call like a tunnel effect, where you have trees on either side of you and you have buildings, that tends to slow drivers down. And so that's actually really working well toward what we're recommending with that like wider tree buffer. And then we also have in Four Corners slightly taller buildings. So that's going to hopefully slow people down as they head to the school area.
And I do have some data not directly related to speeds, but the Federal Highway Administration maintains a database of crash reduction factors that are associated with these changes. And so reducing a travel lane width from 12 feet to 10 feet, which is roughly what we're suggesting here, can reduce crashes of various sorts between 5% and up to even roughly 30%. So really significant improvement to the safety.
We're glad we're doing that in any of these proposals. And I guess the last thing would just be DOT, on these two proposals, if there's any point of view here.
Sure. For the record, Corey Pitts, MCDOT. Recognizing that option A, which was our preferred option, is past us at this point. I think DOT aligns most closely with option B because we still have the concern about how we're going to move transit through this corridor. And we do have concerns that repurposing the lane and shrinking us down to less lanes and mixing the transit with general traffic could have unintended effects on those transit riders moving through this very busy intersection. We do think that this option, while it doesn't get us all the way in terms of 10-foot sidewalks everywhere and really wide buffers, I think it does a lot to actually change the existing conditions. And obviously, lots of details still left to be worked out when this thing ultimately gets engineered.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and thank you for reminding us that that wasn't on the table. Yeah.
Thank you. Could I just ask on the side path question? Is there any wiggle room on a 10-foot side path? Because 2 feet is too small. So I wanted to be able to move towards Councilmember Mink's proposal, to be totally candid with you, because I thought it was thoughtful and I thought it was a good balance. My deep reservation is this 2-foot buffer question and the life and death dynamic that creates. That's what I am very, very concerned about. And I'm not sure I can justify in my own mind that. So let me first ask is there a standard that is even allowable, or you could do a side path of less than 10 feet that could extend that 2 foot in the smaller 73 foot right away so that you could get an additional buffer to 3 or 4 feet? That's the first question.
Yeah, thank you. So it is possible to have a side path that's narrower. This is already sort of a compromise position with 10 feet. Ideally, we'd have 11-foot side paths because that does allow for 2 people biking to pass each other at the same time. Again, not as wide as the breezeway, which is not part of this proposal, that would allow people biking and walking to pass each other. So this is already a tight fit for 2 people biking past each other. We do have very high pedestrian volumes here, as I mentioned earlier. But to directly answer your question, and we could go down, it is possible to go down to an 8-foot facility. It just would not accommodate the level of activity that we have today and would anticipate in the future.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Mann, clarification.
Yeah, I mean, I was just wondering about that same area because there is currently, as we can see in the photo on slide 8, circle 10, that there's currently the 6-foot buffer in front of the Safeway there. And so, yeah, I mean, I agree that 2 feet is not wide enough. And so I was just confused as to why of the 12 feet that would be available under this option, you know, that why would best pedestrian safety practices lead us to that kind of 10-2 split? So, but I think you're just addressing, that's exactly what you just addressed, if I understand.
Yeah, and thank you for raising the 6-foot buffer. We were discussing whether it would be helpful to clarify that or not. I think Mr. Kenny spoke very clearly that there's a lot of variation through this area. So this is an area where directly in front of the Safeway, there's a 6-foot buffer, but everything between there and Colesville Road goes down to mostly 0 feet today. There's one section with a small 5-foot buffer. Yeah, thank you for this slide. So there's really no buffer today. And maybe I'm hesitant to say this because I might take us back a bit, but a bit of context again, that this initial concept came out of the idea that there would then be further widening. We've discussed that. We are not widening right of way. So to keep it within the facility, the right of way width that we have today, this was sort of the compromise position.
Thank you. Were you reaching for the button? Feel free.
So again, Jessica McVeary for the record. I think that, you know, from staff's perspective, as we were working through all of these dimensions, I just want to reiterate that we kept coming back to the highest priority being the people who are walking, biking, and rolling here, which include a very high number of students that don't always use the best judgment. And so I think that we were really trying to make sure that that was the focus and the priority above transit or vehicular throughput is focusing on the people who are walking, biking, and rolling here.
I appreciate that. And, you know, as I indicated at the last session, if we're talking about, you know, making sacrifices on the vehicular side for one thing or another, my priority would be on the pedestrian safety side for the walking, biking, and rolling for the exact reason that you're talking about, very high traffic, student area, et cetera. And also, I want to make sure that we're having that fulsome conversation about the impact on traffic there, because that is a very serious reality as well. Has there been conversation with State Highway about these options here, about affordability, about like timelines, likelihood of these options actually getting done? I will just note that we have been, my office in particular, we've been waiting on some approved pedestrian safety items for this particular area for like 2 years. And now they're telling us that they don't have to do it because it's going to maybe be done with the pedestrian safety action plan. And those folks the folks working on that plan are saying that there's no reason that should hold up the team on the other side. So there's a lot of delays happening on that side. And ultimately, like, we all agree that we need pedestrian safety changes to happen here. And I just want to make sure that something gets done. So what have those conversations been?
Thank you for that question. So we held a charrette with MCDOT as well as SHA before we came up with any options. And so we had SHA at the table kind of weighing in and providing what you saw with the public hearing draft. The one thing I think we tried to keep in mind for the implementing agencies is we know it's a real hurdle when we have to have dedication from property owners to make projects happen. So one of the advantages of the option, the public hearing draft option, which I think that's C on here. I just want to, there's so many different discussions happening. C, one of the advantages of this is it only works within the public right of way, so you don't have to have dedication from property owners. So it could be implemented pretty readily. I think where we have real challenges when we're trying to do these transportation projects is when we have to rely on that really makes the project schedule quite long, and it also makes it quite costly. So I think there is a big advantage to this being within the existing right of way.
Thank you. Okay. I appreciate that. I appreciate the conversation. I am going to personally reserve judgment on this until full council because my constituents haven't had time to weigh in on some of the nuances of this conversation, and I think that's going to be important for me to decide what to do here. Thank you.
Okay, so you're somewhat withholding your recommendation here of what you're asking. I just want to make sure I'm understanding. We have the B and C options. We've now fleshed them out. One has a real concern about the 2 feet, which I think everybody is concerned about. Understanding what that means and how to address it, I think, matters. Let me turn it back to Councilmember Ming just to get clarification, and then I'll turn it to Councilmember Joanda.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and my understanding is that in regards to the 2 feet, that there is potentially some wiggle room or some discussion that might be worth having there about whether we would want if option B move forward, about whether it would make sense to shift any of the side path into buffer. But that said, I'll maintain my position where it is now, but also have a desire to return to the conversation at full council, more fully informed by the public's opportunity.
Sure. Could I just make a slight suggestion? If there's an approach and a modified approach that addresses that, maybe to say 10 feet, minimum of 10 feet where possible, no less than 4 feet for pedestrian buffer or something like that for consideration once we get back to it. I think that would be helpful. Unless and until we have that, I'm not personally comfortable moving forward with a proposal that only allows for a 2-foot buffer, particularly in a corridor where we've lost a number of people on this stretch. So that's where I'm at. I'm very open to an adjustment if something comes forward that will address that issue, and it seems like there could be a possibility of that. But for the time being, I'm not comfortable moving forward with anything where the standard would be at 2 feet, because from a pedestrian safety and life and death dynamic here on the roadway, that just seems to be an unacceptable level from a planning document standpoint, and for something that I would be comfortable approving. Councilmember Joanda.
Yes, I appreciate the discussion. I would like to see that proposal. So I would just take it a step further and say if you could put together a mock, I don't know who the you is, but collectively a mock-up of what you suggested would be possible. I know it's not your, a lot of times in the Education Committee we'll ask MCPS for non-recommended reductions, and so if there was a way to transfer some of the buffer, to create a larger buffer, I agree 2 feet is not acceptable, particularly on that stretch. But if there's a way to make it a little more and we could still maintain the travel lane to get to the point of DOT's concern around transit moving through and just taking the totality of the circumstances. But I would be in a similar place, I think, as at least Councilmember Friedson. If that's, I would like, until seeing that, I'll stick with where we are. But if we did have that, I would like you to work on that between now and full council. Thank you.
All right, agreed. The committee recommendation 3-0 is going to be with the public hearing draft as discussed, but we have a request to continue working on refining this. I know Councilmember Mink will be working on this as well, and I think you're hearing a clear openness to address it as long as the clear pedestrian safety issue is able to be addressed in another reasonable way. And I asked for the engagement of Montgomery County Department of Transportation because the transit dynamic here matters too, because we did, make certain recommendations against their interests on that. And so, having their engagement on this is helpful. Pedestrian safety needs to be number one, particularly in an area where there's so many students that are traversing this area, and that is an incredibly dangerous, intersection and series of intersections. So, with that, I think we have a 3-0 committee recommendation with an interest in continuing the engagement and the thoughts on this as we move forward. I believe that is everything that we have.
There are two additional on that item. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. Okay, let's continue.
So there are two additional follow-up items. There is the long-term vision of the Four Corners Street Network, which was sort of the vestige of the street grid concept, where it was kind of moved into a long-term study. The committee noted that this is perhaps obsolete now that the street grid concept has kind of been reduced in other parts of the plan, and that we're moving forward with a different approach for Four Corners. So council staff suggests the committee recommend removing.
Without objection.
Yeah, thank you. And the last follow-up item is the clarification of the BRT recommendations. There's a lot of language on the last page of the staff report addendum, basically saying that clarifying that the plan's recommendation is not to provide dedicated transit lanes in BRT, but that this is reaffirming existing recommendations, especially since the committee's recommendation is no longer to do bus lanes through Four
Thanks for
Corners.
this. The whole plan reaffirms. There was one aspect of the plan that didn't reaffirm. We rejected that aspect of the plan, and so we're overall reaffirming, even though I will note again, Department of Transportation had asked for that, but we're not moving forward with that. So thank you for this language. I think this reflects what the committee was looking to do. So without objection, we will accept the reaffirming of the 2013 functional master plan on bus rapid transit, which the county executive pushed very hard for, and which will continue. With that, I believe now we have officially gone through all the items within the addendum. And so we have exhausted all of the issues. If we're ready, I think we can take a vote on referring this to the full council. All those in favor of the plan as amended by the committee, please indicate by raising your hand. That's 2. All those opposed, that's 1. It's a 2-to-1 committee recommendation to the full council, and we will conclude our conversations here. I just want to thank Department of Transportation, Office of Legislative Oversight, the County Executive's Office, the Planning Department, the Planning Board, council staff, everybody for being here, the residents who have engaged on this process throughout. Really appreciate the thoughtfulness, and to our district council colleague who has joined us for every single one of these meetings. We have had quite a few, and we appreciate it. And with that, we are adjourned.